Right. Let's see this. Does this work? Let's see this. Does this work? Okay. They can hear me. Hey, Chantilly and Doja, can y'all try say something? Yeah. Chantilly and Doja, can y'all try say something? Yeah. Chantilly and Doja, can y'all try say something? Oh boy, hold on.
I got
some. Oh wait, somebody
I'm
says
on.
sounds
I
good.
think.
Okay. So loops. It is looping. Okay.
Loop. Fruity Loop.
Okay. Well, y'all. I mean, if I turn on the mic, y'all can hear me, right? Now, okay. Chantilly, can you try talking? Y'all tell me if you can hear Chantilly. Tell me if you can hear Chantilly talk. All right. Keep talking. Okay. God damn it. Oh shit. That's funny. Play not a slave. Oh my god. Oh boy. Oh shit. I might have to restart this damn stream. God dang it. All right, hold up. Maybe. Okay, we're gonna.
I really love that react of like where it looks like Lin-Manuel Miranda is looking at something on someone's phone, disgusted. People use it on Twitter a lot, and it's my favorite.
Yes.
Oh, I love that. Those
Yes.
little reacts. So cool.
Okay.
Oh no.
I think we're good. Now they hear. It's not just both of us. There's three of us. There's Chantilly, Doja Bird, and me, Gomer. All right? Shantilly is quiet. Shantilly, can you bump up your audio? Because there's not a fucking thing I can do.
Can I bump up my audio?
Yeah.
I don't fucking know how to do that.
Okay, hold on. I can bump it up on I'll bump it up on my end.
Okay. Then. I was just going to start screaming. So.
Okay.
I already talk loud, so I'm sure that my audio is fine.
Okay, awesome. Okay, great.
Oh, yeah.
Yeehaw, yeehaw, everybody. Thank you so much. Thank y'all for being good. Thank y'all for being nice. I'm so sorry that I suck at this. All right, let's do it. Let us.
Hello.
Okay, yes. Let me introduce everybody. All right. Hello, everybody. I am Gomer. It's been a week. It's really funny not doing Tuesday streams recently. I'm a boomer, exactly. It's really funny not doing Tuesday streams anymore recently. I might go back to it because honestly, like I feel like I don't talk to y'all for a whole week, and it is like it's a whole week, but it feels really long. So today I have with me two wonderful guests who know a lot more about these subjects than I do. Hey everyone, keep the bigotry to a minimum. Yeah, no problem there, Mike Dixie Wrecked. Thank you. So I have two people with me. I have Shantilly. Shantilly, you want to say hi? And I mean, you don't have to introduce yourself. You can just say hi, and you can introduce yourself if you want.
What's poppin'? I'm Shantilly. My pronouns are they, them, and I am happy to be here. That is all.
Thank you, Shantilly. Very good. And we also have Doja Bird in the form of disappointed Whoopi Goldberg.
No, it's just Whoopi Goldberg. I'm here to talk finally about my life. No, man. I'm here. I hope everyone can hear me. And my pronouns are she, her, hers. And I'm sorry that y'all can't see my face today. My internet is playing with me. I thought it was because my husband was playing Hitman 3. I was wrong. He was not online. I may have put that evil on him. But no, my internet just sucks because Comcast hates me and doesn't want us to succeed. And somebody asked for my pronouns again, she, her, hers, just to double check.
And
that's it.
All right. Comcast does indeed suck, Exquisite Orbis. Clouded, thank you for that. I got a couple of people in here who might be able to mod, and I have at least one mod who is in chat. So usually it's really funny. Yeah, indeed, Sean, get clapped. It's really funny. I don't get as many dingbats coming into my stream as so many others do. You know, so luckily we will be okay. Oh shit, Doja Bird is the one who said Comcast is the worst. Is like responding to you via text and voice. Thank you, Clouded. Yeah, I appreciate that. Dingbats be gone indeed. So shit, okay. What do y'all think? Y'all ready to get started?
Yeah. I'm still trying to figure out how to be present in this moment. This is so like people are looking at me. It's fine. I'm ready to get started.
Yeah. Hey everybody, can y'all give some queer hamsicles in the chat for Shantilly to make them feel more at home? Give me some queer hamsticks. Come on.
I have to say, it's really comforting to be able to see a lot of the same usernames as people that I see on Twitter. And so I'm just like really thankful that y'all are here because I think streaming is really weird. The fact that there's like a video that exists of me forever, like on the internet is like,
I mean, if you ever feel uncomfortable, I can always take it down. That is something that I.
Oh no! I mean, like I think it's like something you have to get used to. I mean, like I'm out there, I'm out there like on the internet, but it's just I don't know, something about this is just so different. It's so interactive. Yeah. Somebody said Twitter's weird. Yeah, all this is so weird, but it's cool. We get to be in this space together. So like, I'm just trying to really like lean into that and like center that.
Absolutely. Let's see. Oh, damn. Okay, Elijah, thank you for subscribing. I appreciate that. And also Lost in Nowhere, thank you for subscribing. I'm just doing my dances for both of you. Thank you so much. Chantilly's helping out. Thank you so much, Chantilly.
It's rapport.
Rapport, yes. Awesome.
Oh, thank you. Sorry. Thank you, Jason Voorhees 525.
Okay, sorry, I got distracted for a second. Let's begin. Women Racing Class. We're going to do part 2 of Women Racing Class. I am going to be reading off the slides, and my friends here are going to be correcting me about the things that I got wrong and expanding upon some of the things that I wrote. So let's just get straight down into God dang it. The green box is supposed to be all of it, but the green box has decided to resize itself. So we are going to do all these chapters that are shown here, not just the very bottom one. So, yes, we are going to cover all these chapters that you see here. That is Angela Davis. She was, amazingly beautiful and amazingly smart. So yeah, this we're going to do some trigger warnings up front. This book has some very extremely heavy stuff. We're going to cover probably the most heaviest chapters in the book. Chapter 1 is very heavy, but there is a chapter we're going to cover that's even, I don't know if it's heavier, but it's as heavy as chapter 1. Oh shit, Smith is online?
Oh,
Smith, are you online? They didn't say anything. Hold on.
That's like a probably.
Oh my God. Smith. All right. Well, we got the whole crew here. Smith, please behave in the chat. Do not get me banned from Twitch. All right.
I've never been in the chat with Smith. I'm like really excited. I've just heard so much about them. I'm like,
thank you, Chantilly. Smith failed the stealth check. That's funny. Damn, Lost in Nowhere. Shit, you doing it. Thank you so much. All right. So disclaimer is that they're going to be responding to these slides. I made the slides, and if they're ignorant, please do not think that it reflects poorly on them. All right. So continuing. All right. I'm going to get right into it. Okay. Black women and the club movement, the clubs. All right. This is the kind of club that maybe your grandma was in. My grandma was in one of the clubs, actually. I found out, like in many places in the South, there were still these women's clubs that were like holdovers from, the early 1900s. So yeah, club movement started mid 1800s, tried to give women independence and a way to get education and do community service that is not part of like the church or auxiliary groups to men's groups. Because that was the thing. Until the club movement, women basically had their only options was to join these men's groups or like be a part of these auxiliaries to the men's groups, which is basically being in the men's group, or do things through the church. So this was a secular way that was very education focused, and it was very middle class. It was very like petty bourgeoisie. Okay, so like working class women were not super big part of this. Okay, most of the clubs studied literature and history, and they held discussions. And some clubs gave speeches on various, like they would do things beyond literature and history, and they would focus on law, science, even, right? But the majority of clubs were literature and history and like more like formal education type stuff that women just didn't have access to at this time. So this is some intro stuff. Shantilly and Doja Bird, if y'all want to make any comments, feel free before I go on to the next slide.
No, I feel like you covered it.
Okay, awesome.
Well, I will ask one question. I don't know if it's just me, but I have the stream open on my, and it's showing the slide. Can everyone else see the slide? Is it just my phone? I just wasn't sure.
Okay. They can say they can see him. Okay, good.
Okay, cool.
Sorry, Shantilly.
No, it's totally fine. I have them on my computer. I just want to make sure we can move forward.
Okay. Doja, you good on this one?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, awesome. This is just some background because now we're going to get to the racism and the hard work that.
Yay, racism!
Yeah. We're going to get into the hard work that Black women did as well, because the club movement was not just white women. All that stuff that we said a second ago was white women shit, okay? And it was good. It was important as far as like white women getting access to education for the first time is not a bad thing. The bad thing, in my opinion, is in barring non-white women from doing it and in being extremely classist about it.
Yep.
So the General Federation of Women's Clubs had a summit, a convention, right? And they rejected the only black delegate. And they published the most wild racist story. Y'all, I'm gonna give you the Cliff Notes version, but basically it was like a woman married a man who looked completely white, but he had like one great-great-grandfather who was black, and because of that, she gave birth to a completely black baby, and her life was ruined.
I just can't. It's like
it's not good. It's very odd.
Yeah. See, I love that says here.
Genetics work.
What?
I don't think that's how genetics work either.
No. It said like gave birth to a jet black baby. The shock was so great that she turned her face to the wall and died.
I hope it's okay for me to laugh at this because it's just so racist, but also so ridiculous.
Yeah, how could you believe a story like that? But at the same time, I mean, they published it in the newsletter.
And people were like, oh my.
Yeah.
Sorry for her. But I think that the honest, like the nugget of stuff from there is that like racism is ridiculous. Like,
yes, racism is
so I can't think of better words, but it's ridiculous. Because even with a lot of the stuff that people say on Twitter, I'm like, that's the most ridiculous thing I've read today. That is not based in any kind of reality. So I don't know. The ridiculous things people buy into.
Yeah.
When I read this, I was reminded. So my daughter is very fair skinned, and when she was born, she was white. And like the nurses and everyone kind of looked like, what's going on here? And I was just like, no, that's how that can happen. Like,
I was also
when I read the story, I was like, well, I didn't die. I understood that is the thing. That is how genetics work.
Absolutely.
But having the opposite real story. Now I'm not gonna post a picture of my kid, but yeah. Very pale.
Well,
oh, really? Somebody said, yeah, same thing. I mean, like, yeah, people kept telling me she would darken up. She did not. It's okay. She's still a beautiful black child, just a little on the paler side.
Right on. I was born blonde-haired, blue-eyed, if y'all can believe that.
I mean, yeah, genetics and the way that it works is wild. I think my favorite thing was the medical racism I experienced because they randomly selected me for drug testing after that. They were like, we are going to do everything to get this white baby away from this black woman.
Whoa.
I was just like, she came out of my body, but okay.
Yeah, you were all there when that happened.
Wow.
And this is Boston. So it's weird also too to see here in this book, like when Boston is highlighted as like New England, the land of no racism. And I'm just like, okay.
Dude, I mean, I've been to Roxbury. I know what Boston is like.
Boston's really something. People put the Black Lives Matter sign out, but at like, their $1 million home. And then they're just like gentrifying. They're like, Black Lives Matter, but as long as they're all the way over there. fine. Oh yeah, the land of H.P. Lovecraft and his cat.
And his cat. That's right. It's I mean, yeah, it's bad news. I just thought it was really funny when I was reading the Malcolm X autobiography, and whenever he was talking about Boston area, and I just remember like I spent a little bit of time in Boston, not too long, but I very much remember white people being like I went to an AA meeting in Roxbury because I was like, hey, I want to go see a little bit outside the city, see a little bit more, how regular people live. So I went out there and people were like, are you fucking kidding me? You went to Roxbury? Are you fucking kidding me? And I was like, yes. So, yeah, white people really do be clutching their pearls sometimes if you tell them that you went to even a not white part of town.
Oh yeah. I mean, like when I moved up here, I was in South Boston. I moved up here in 2015. And I remember like people, like white people would just say to me, like once they were like, oh, this is a very non-threatening Black woman, which I'm like, I don't know why you think that, but okay. They'd be like, oh yeah, you used to not see a brown person like past Dodd Ave, as if it was just a thing that happened. Like all the Black and brown people just decided independently. It wasn't like there was like racism or hate crimes, nothing. Just didn't go past Dodd at like this one line. And it's like, why do you think that is? Just nope.
That's it. Shantilly, by the way, you are a little bit quiet. So if you want to yell, you got to yell.
All right. I'm a theater kid. I can project.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so continuing. Like I said, the white clubs were started mostly by middle-class women for the education, but the Black women's clubs, which did start around the same time, they were in response to the lynchings, and they were to help with the legal battle. So, for example, helping out Black people who protected themselves against cops, like fundraising for people who had been wronged, fundraising for legal defense, because there's a lot of, oh no, okay. You're okay, Lupe. That's funny. Okay, so yeah, I just thought that was fascinating that like immediately the white women's clubs are all about this same like kind of white woman stuff that has been the hallmark of the feminist movement even up to today, and the Black women stuff has been a lot of the things that are the hallmark of Black liberation in up to today. So I don't know, like, did y'all get those same vibes as far as like, wow, ain't it wild that, it hasn't changed?
This book is just so much like, oh, wow, this hasn't changed at all. Yeah, I like that. It's like they came together. It was like, they always use that term. It's like for the good of the race. Like they had I think it's amazing that the Black women at that time had such I keep like saying like a long view for what they were moving towards, which I think we'll get into later with like the concessions that were made around women's suffrage. And it's like they're really like responding, right, to like lynching and all these other things that are just like they're recognizing that it goes beyond like womanhood, and that they like are not going to abandon like everyone. And I just think that's just like so powerful that they knew that. And that, it's like, I like that it says that they didn't just emulate white women's clubs. Because what I kept coming back around to was when I was thinking about women's clubs, I was thinking about like Black fraternities and sororities and how they have their own culture. Like I used to kind of like hate on like Black Greek life because I was just like, oh, you just wanted to do that because white people had that. But when you really get more into like the history, you realize that it's like even though it was like started in that vein, or maybe it could have began that way, it didn't stay that way for long at all. And it's like, yeah, Black people are just so generative. It's like just creating and like constantly, and I love it.
Right on. Yeah, I don't know much about Black Greek life. I know like some of my Black friends who have talked about it to me have told me that in many HBCUs, like it's almost necessary to get involved with Black Greek life. This is not anything that I'm saying out of like from my own experience, just what my friends have told me. And they said that, the Black Greek life continues much more after college than white Greek life does during college, that like you kind of become part of a form of, a true fraternity, like a true brotherhood for like, the rest of your life. You can actually call on these people. You make, you have group meetings and stuff outside. So I don't know. Is any of that true, or did I just have a friend who was pulling my leg?
No, yeah, it is really, it's so funny because I only like discovered like a little bit ago that my husband was in a fraternity, because he never talks about it. He has like no letters or anything from it. And he's just like, oh yeah, that's just the thing I did in college, because he's a white guy who went to a white college, and it was like some like service fraternity, who cares? And I was just like, whoa, that's so different. Because like, if you were Black, your letters would be like on a mug. You would have a t-shirt at least, if not a hoodie. And like, yeah, I have a friend who was one of the first like gender nonconforming people to pledge to a Black fraternity. And they like worked really hard to get into Greek life, to have that experience. And like, I lived with them in this queer radical cooperative. And I just remember that, like, yeah, when they talked so much about like brotherhood, like I could tell how much it meant to them, and how like that experience had changed them and changed like the fraternity itself. Like it was just like, it just seemed so special. I grew up in a family, my stepmother's AKA, which is Alpha Kappa Alpha. That's VP Harris's sorority. Just gonna make that face. But like, she loves it. She loves it. And like I don't know, like I thought about it. I mean, I won't even get into the history of like Black sororities, because there is like a lot of colorism and things like that. But the life is like really, it is really truly like brotherhood, sisterhood, togetherness. And I'm like, looking back, I'm kind of like, oh, I wish I had pledged something. Like that probably would have been really good for my development as like a Black person. But I really was not so pro-Black until I was like on the tail end of my college experience. So I think that's just something that I don't get to have, and that's okay.
Right on. Yeah, and it's very interesting to me. Okay, so I think this is a person that maybe both y'all could talk at length about. But some of the people who were very prominent in the club scene at the time is Ida B. Wells, who, yeah, Shantilly already shaking their head, yes.
Yeah, well, it's also because I looked at the next slide and saw Susan B. Anthony and got filled with rage. And then I like,
yeah, well, yeah, Chantilly, you can talk at length on Susan B. Anthony in the next slide. But yeah, it's very interesting because we have like these very contrasting and very different historical figures, and it's fascinating to me because they're people that I never learned about growing up. And like Andrew Jackson is a fucking monster, right? Andrew Jackson is a horrible, like literal demon from hell. And and then you have people like Ida B. Wells, who is like inspiring, could have inspired many people when I was growing up. As far as like, people always talk about you have no heroes. Like a lot of non-white people don't have representation, and it's so wild to me because history has infinite representation of non-white people doing amazing things. It's a choice that they don't have representation. It's purposeful. Mm-hmm. I mean, would y'all agree with that?
Oh, 100%. Absolutely. I just think it's interesting because when I have conversations with other Black people on the internet and in real life, how much you don't learn about being Black at school. I think the only reason that I have so much like empowering history is from what I learned growing up in like a Black Baptist church. Is like in Sunday school lessons, it's like, yeah, you talk about the God stuff, and I'm not religious, so that never stuck with me. But it was when we would talk about like history and historical figures, like I think that is what really like very slowly but surely led me to like a more revolutionary side of things.
Awesome. Hell yeah.
And I don't know. I think that it's a disservice. How much like Black kids just don't get to learn about all the sick shit and all the sick history that we have. And that's like something I'm really passionate about.
Hell yeah. I mean,
yeah, I similarly like grew up in a Black Baptist church. I think I mentioned it on the last stream, but my pastor ran the like free Black newspaper in our town. And I keep saying that I'm going to call him and be like, are you a communist? Because I think I just know. You know what I mean? Like, I just know. I was like looking at the newspaper because it's online. And I was just kind of scrolling through it. I was like, nah. But anyway, yeah, I mean, like, I don't really identify as a Christian. I'm like, I guess I'm spiritual, but not religious. I hate that.
It's all right.
It's complicated. It's complicated, my relationship with that. But it's like, yeah, similarly, I got all of my understanding of Blackness from church. And like, it was, you know, pulling from the Bible and connecting it to these Black radical traditions. But then I went to an all white school where like, when we learned about slavery, and, you know, like they would mention that, I don't even think I learned about Booker T. Washington, to be honest, y'all. Like, I think if I did, it was because I read like a little, like, I mean, the equivalent now, I guess, is like those who was like this historical person. But we had like a book series that was like before that. And I read one about like Crispus Attucks and stuff, you know, like, but I had to seek that stuff out on my own. Or I had to have it given to me by like a teacher that took pity and was like, oh, like this Black student should know about Black people. But it was never taught to the whole class. It was always a very like one-on-one, let me pull you aside, here's a thing for you, like type of deal.
Ain't that wild though?
Yeah.
The two most interesting things to me is that also the fact that like we both got most of our information about Blackness from church is like wonderful in a lot of ways, but also like purposefully shitty in other ways, because like they made church the only refuge for Black people as a way to assimilate us into because I mean in Africa we were not Christians, you know what I mean?
Right.
So the forcing of church on Black people is like a whole other topic of conversation. And then the other just wild anecdote, just thinking about being a Black person at all white schools. I remember when we finally talked about civil rights, everyone didn't know that Martin Luther King was dead. And that was crazy to me.
Wow. We went to Memphis to visit where he was shot. Like, my church took us, not my school, you know?
Hold up.
Like,
y'all was taught that, or people thought that Martin Luther King wasn't dead?
At my school, I grew up in the West Coast. Yeah, no, 100%.
Wow, that was
surprising for people. And I just remember being like, what do you... And people just... There were some people that didn't even know who he was. And all of that was so wild to me.
Oh, man.
Because, I mean, I grew up with our friend Martin, you know, watching that very interesting little movie. But, yeah. It's interesting.
Right on.
Double consciousness. The way that white kids are raised and the way that non-white kids are raised is different stuff.
And, you know, I feel like it's such a loss, too, because, like, I don't know how many people looking at this stream right now are white, but, like, not getting to hear or learn about, like, the Black radical tradition. It's, like, so much of this is interesting, and the stories are, I think, like, inspirational. You know, I was saying like this about like Harriet Tubman to someone recently, because I was just like, you know, like it was sort of, I like struggle with like John Brown and stuff. And I was just like, you know, Harriet Tubman never really gets like celebrated, but I think it's because like we don't learn a lot about her, or like how her like example of just like so much of what we're reading right now is about like these people questing to like get the right to vote. And what I love about Harriet Tubman's example is that like she understood the rules of the land and she just went like, nah, like I'm not going to engage with that. Like, you can't tell me shit. And that like reminds me this week, you know, I was I don't know if people are aware of like the folks with Move and the bombing that happened in Philly in 1985, and how like it just like came out this week that like, what is it, UPenn like had the bones of like 2 of their children.
What?
And just were like, yeah, they were using them in like an anthropology class, and they had not alerted the next of kin or like any of the people who have been released with Move. And like someone broke the news, and so like UPenn and like I think it's like Princeton have been like fighting about like, oh, we don't know who had the bones. We didn't know anything about it. It's just like watching a bunch of academics like throw each other under the bus. And what really inspires me about Move and also Harriet Tubman is just like this, just like, I don't care what your laws are. I don't care like what sort of like reformist bullshit or, oh, go through the proper channels shit you're going to tell me. Like, I'm just going to do like what feels liberatory for me. Because I mean, like, someone could have made the argument to Harriet, like, well, we do have a system. If you find a free person who will buy you out of slavery, right, it's fine. Like, right? Like, there were ways, and it's like, and if you vote, then a revolution. And if you and I mean, like, you know, they call her Moses for a reason, because did Moses go to Pharaoh and go, I would like to talk about some reforms to the way that you're treating the Hebrews? No, he left. And that's like something that comes up. And, you know, like, I'm sure like Shantilly, like, you know, like it comes up in like the Black church tradition so much, the story of Moses, the story of liberation. And I was just like, I don't know. So like reading this when like everyone's fighting so much about like the vote, and like, I'm just like, you are all the worst. And they're throwing each other under the bus for the vote. And I'm just like, voting? And then like, what was it at the end of like one of the chapters, they talk about like, and then voting happened. And then when Black women went to vote, they got murdered. It's like, oh, yeah. It seems like that would happen. Like,
definitely. And that section fucked me up. I mean, we'll get to it, but that section was very.
Yeah, we'll get to it. Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm looking in the chat. Yeah, I was just saying the Samuel Morton skulls. I read only a little about that. So it was like, wasn't it that UPenn also had like, yeah, like indigenous bones on display that they also were like, oh, we don't have to give those back either. It's like, what are y'all doing? And I just found out one of my friends is going to UPenn. They're like, oh, I got into this social work program. And I'm just like, I don't know. I feel like that's the first school we gotta burn down. It seems like
there's a lot of them. But so yeah. Just getting back to it, Ida B. Wells, really great. We could talk about Ida B. Wells forever, and we will talk about her again. Mary Church Terrell, we will not talk about again, but another important person at the time who was agitating through the written word and through speeches. The reason I think that Angela Davis mentions her by name is, of course, because she's important historically, as in like actually made some changes historically. But I think the reason she made the book in particular is to show that like there is this painting, this like forgive me if I step over the line here, but there's this kind of misogynoir type painting of Black women sometimes that is like, fighting and like angry, but not like able to move people with words and be eloquent. And not saying like, a well-spoken Black man, like that type of shit, but I'm saying like, there's this disparaging image that comes from never showing the people who are the people like able to write fantastic speeches and write, or give fantastic speeches and write moving articles, And so like, I think that Angela Davis may have specifically included her simply because it's like, hey, look, like this was going on too. Like it was people fighting in the streets. It was people organizing, like labor organizers anywhere you can think of. It was people writing these essays and such. And that so many times, if you imagine like an essay writer or you imagine a great speaker, the first thing that comes to mind is a white man. And I think maybe what she was saying here is like, that ain't never been the case, right? It's like there's this whole untold story of people, making moves that we just don't know about. Shantilly, I saw you nodding a bit, so
I feel strongly about it. I think that the anger and passion of Black women, which is totally called for, this anger, is often portrayed as animalistic and something that should not be taken seriously. And so what I love that Davis does so much in this book is she just gives you the reality of what Black people were doing. And I think that there's a reason why they don't teach us about Black people, because if you did, I don't think people would be as racist as they are. Like, of course, white supremacist conditioning runs deep. But I mean, if you read this book and still thought some of the things that people think about Black people, I don't know how you could really do that, because it's all so moving. And another thing is, like, just to talk about Twitter and stuff, when people talk about organizing, it's just so interesting to me, because from my experience, the people that are doing the most all the time, that are exhausted, that are working so hard, that are putting their bodies on the line, it's always Black women and queer folks and Black queer folks that are doing the hardest, most exhausting work, the most dangerous work. And I don't know, we should just put some respect on their names, okay? And that is,
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think too that it's a different way of connecting. Like, the way that Black women talk about struggle, it's like, it's not always just like, workers of the world unite, and like, okay, I've done some sloganeering and I'm done. It's like, there's so much, there's so much emotion, and like, but I think to that point about like animalistic, right? I mean, like, so much of what is going on Twitter and what's going on these platforms is about, like, when we talk about debate bros, it's like, okay, well, debate is a very particular style and you can't do this and that. And like, oh, that's too emotional. And it's this idea that like having emotions is inherently like lesser. And I think that it's really hard to connect to. Yes, it's so deeply. And it's just, that's why I focus so much on like the emotional pieces of bringing us all together, because it's like, I think it's really hard to read a book like this and not feel it. And so it's like, if you can read this and feel it, that means like you're connected to like the spirit of liberation. That I think is something that like Black women have carried. I hope can be open to everyone who, wishes to engage with it. And I say spirit in a more like general sense, not necessarily like connected to any religious tradition. Cause I mean, like, so much of this is because we're denied this like debate bro, like, like esque thing. It's not even, it's like, okay, I'm denied that, but I also don't want that. You know what I mean? Like, it's like, I want I want space for emotions. And like, just because someone is emotional doesn't mean that their point doesn't have value. I think that those are some of the most valuable points. Like, the civil rights movement would not have gone where it did without that. And so, I don't know. I could talk a lot about like the lack of space for like emotional depth in like, leftist spaces. It really bugs me. It's really sad.
I mean, it's interesting though, Doja, the idea of having emotional space. I personally and maybe this is just me as like an emotionally repressed white man, but I feel like so many of these streamers are just doing this thing where they're just constantly angry, and it's just anger porn 24/7, and there's so little calmness and discussion, and like really like, going deep into things. It's just like reacting to videos of people doing bad things and shouting into a microphone. You know what I mean? Like, I get passionate on this channel, but I feel like when, it's like Chantilly was saying, you know, like the anger oftentimes is appropriate for black women, non-men, and I feel like so often whenever a white man is angry, it looks strong, and or it's portrayed as like strong and reasonable, and wow, look how passionate this person is. And then if a black woman is angry, it's like, you know, it's like you said, you know, all those negative things are assigned to it, and there's literally no reason other than bigotry. Like it's like there is no extra thinking that, you know, Senor White Man is doing over there. You know what I mean? It's like like I've listened to these people.
It's amazing that like men have really successfully branded anger as not an emotion. And like that it's just like, and it's especially that it's like when a man is angry, yeah, it's reasonable. And when women are angry, when non-men are angry, it's just unreasonable. It's just rooted in nothing. Something that I have pulled from the like Unitarian Universalist space is this idea of having righteous anger. So this is something that we had like a lot of ministers that like went to the border and got arrested, or people who, I don't know if people are familiar with No More Deaths, but it's like a campaign in like the Arizona desert. There was a guy who was like arrested for like leaving water out. There's like a video, I think, of like Border Patrol agents like knocking over things of water, and like the rage, right? It's like the rage that we feel at injustice around us is part of like being connected to the struggle of other people. And I feel like that is ignored when we talk about having rage, being enraged, that it's somehow unreasonable to see oneself in another person who is lesser than you. And something we talk about in the UU space is just like calling on this idea of righteous anger. I mean, like we could connect it even back to, again, like I love the story of Moses. I love talking about the story of Moses, but like we talk about like after the Israelites were like in bondage for so long that they cried out, and like the cry was not like, it's not like crying, like the actual like Greek word is like, it's really more about like petitioning, almost like legally. So it's like a really strong, like, I'm not going to take this. And I think that like we, like when I watch Debate Bros, I don't feel like the rage is, I don't feel like it's rage. I think it's just like anger rooted in like their own, like being attacked about a view. And that it's not actually like connected. It's not radical because it's not connected to the roots of oppression. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And
I'll talk on that.
Definitely.
Yeah, sorry. I was like, when in the text, Davis talks about the differences in why white people organize and why Black people organize. And like with the women's club, so much of it was about like kind of hanging out with your pals and like, I don't have shit else to do. But
yeah, it's true.
Seriously. When Black women are organizing, it's because people are being violently murdered. And I mean, I hate to take this topic and connect it to like fucking streamers, but you can see it too in the ways that when white people perform this anger and it's devoid of any realness, you know, because it's like, obviously, what do you have to be this? Why are you so angry about this? You know, people are dying, Kim. But when, you know, like when you see like, Black and brown folks and queer folks talking about our struggles, like you can feel that anger. And I don't know, I think a lot about like how Marx talks. There's this level of like also being alienated from the humanity and emotion.
Yes.
Because if you really felt like a revolutionary humanity, you would not stand for the shit that happens all the time.
Yeah.
So instead, you get falsified performative anger that doesn't come from anything real.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, I think someone was saying something of, oh, I can't hear you. Or is it lagged?
It might be lagged, but
I just don't want to talk over them. So, yeah, like someone was talking about, I guess, like, you know, the whole concept of like the colonizer and the colonized, and that like disconnect, like that, like the lack of like white people being in community with each other. There's just like, I call it like what I do when I am enraged, what I call my righteous anger, like righteous rooted in like that like spiritual tradition of like, you know, but like I like, it's not like being an empath. I fucking hate that whole thing about being an empath. I'm so sorry. It's just like I know how other people feel, because I can imagine that does not feel good. Period. How could you not know what it feels like to be hurt? And like, I think that there's so much in the world that pushes us to forget that. You know, it's like, forget what it's like to be exploited, because that's what we're talking about a lot of the time under capitalism. We're talking about, it's like, even if I can't connect specifically to like circumstance, I can feel, you know, the rage at being exploited. You know, it's like, what did someone say here? Yeah, like anger is a gift. That is something we talk about, like in these like very like left Christian socialist type spaces, is that like, you know, something I learned in therapy, and I think I might have even brought it up in the last stream, is that like anger especially at something that's happening to you, is actually like an expression of love for the self. It's you saying that like, this thing that's happening to me shouldn't be happening to me. And then the thing about empathy is moving further to say, and this should happen to no one. And so like, I always hold that as like, when I get really, there's so much oppression, right? Like I feel, I won't get into like specifics, but it's just like, like there are times in my life when people are like, don't be angry, or like, in the past, I've had white therapists who have been like, okay, well now it's the time when you turn it inwards and you learn how to deal with like these external circumstances. And I'm just like, I don't want to cope with external circumstances that make me feel lesser. I want those external circumstances to go the fuck away. And like, I'm allowed to be angry that structural racism exists, that like misogynoir exists, like, and that I hate that means that I love me, and I know that I deserve to be a fully liberated human being. And I think that that's something that we can all connect to. The idea that we are not supposed to be living like this is bullshit. It's a good thing my camera doesn't work, because I'm just like, it's bullshit. Anyway,
it's good. No, you're good. Thank you so much, Doja. But now I'm gonna bring it around to Susan B. Anthony.
Yeah, so, not someone who sucks. No.
She's another one of the people like on my Arya Stark, like if hell is real and I'm there at some point for whatever reason, like I'm coming for her. I'm on my way, Susan. I will see you there.
It's like that meme of it's from like, it's a screenshot from Doom, the video game. And it's like,
where's Ronald Reagan?
Right, yeah, where's Susan B. Anthony?
Like, where the fuck are the suffragettes? Let's have a chat.
Oh shit. So okay, let me explain for y'all in the chat who may not understand why my comrades here may be not liking people who we put on our silver dollars. Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, as we talked about in the last stream, were very, or 2 streams ago, were very prominent suffragettes. They were trying to get women the right to vote, but they were very, they were bourgeois, NGO type organizers, and as a result, they completely failed to include any kind of intersectionality in their investigation and then in their organizing afterwards. So like their worldview was flawed, and so their organizing became flawed. And I put it that way because of some of the many things that Susan B. Anthony and Elizabeth Cady Stanton both said. We talked about it before, but the line that always comes back to me is Susan B. Anthony saying that she would rather give her right arm than to allow a black man to vote before her. It's very telling. It's very bad. So yeah. Anyway, they failed.
And I will take that arm, Susan. And I will use it for something. I'll turn it into a hairbrush. I don't know.
So here again, Susan B. Anthony says that in the U.S., every male has equal chances. I mean, it's such a funny line. The idea of saying that all white men and all black men have equal chances in the U.S. I mean, like, especially at this time, like late 1800s, I do not feel like black men were being treated very well. I mean, maybe it's just me, but it seems like a bad time.
One would think.
So Anthony tried to do some like very weak sauce organizing even within her own newspaper office, and eventually the people who were involved just kind of like stopped going. So like she couldn't even organize her own workers. She was so out of touch with the class struggle. So I thought that was a very fun. I mean, maybe I didn't read that section properly, but I think that's what they were saying. And I just thought that was so funny that like Susan B. Anthony is so out of touch with both the black struggle and the class struggle that even when she tries to dip her toes into either one, she just completely slips, trips, and falls into her pantyhose. You know what I mean? Like it's just her petticoats, I should say, not I meant to say petticoats. Anyway, so the black suffragettes were widely supported by working women and the women's labor movement, and that includes the women and the men. So, and part of that was because these people like eventually Frederick Douglass kind of passed the torch to W.B. Du Bois, and W.B. Du Bois was eventually even mocking white men for their inability to be polite to white women. He was like, I forget the exact lines, but he was like, fellow black guys, like when you watch these white men be so strong and so good, doesn't it just make you ashamed to be a black man? And it was like, oh man, just murdering us white guys, just being so condescending. And it was like, I mean, but yeah, the white men were so terrible to the suffragettes. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I like that he called it the glorious traditions of Anglo-Saxon manhood. It's like, I'm going to just send that to Marjorie. What's her name? Marjorie Taylor Greene, the American First Caucus. You know,
shit. Yeah, that's the Anglo political traditions that they're talking about, is being a real fucking asshole to women. That's it's just
right. I mean, like so much of God, like, I mean, you know, it's like we talk about toxic masculinity, but it's just like, it's amazing that when white women are putting themselves in a position to not be like ruled over in just this tiny way through the vote, like white men lost their shit. You know,
yeah.
like
yeah.
the like challenge, like I'm just like, I mean, I'm not baffled by it. You know, it's like I read a thing and I'm just like, wow. And then I'm like, that's not really a wow. That makes sense with all the other things that I've read. Oh my gosh.
I always think of that gif where it's like that person there like this and it's like pretends to be shocked. That's so much of reading this. And I will say something that, once again, I really like about this text is that there is this racist stereotype that I hear often about Black people, and especially Black men, that they are more homophobic, sexist, transphobic than their white counterparts. I hear it a lot in the queer community as well, is that Black people are somehow more bigoted than white people. And it's not true. There are bigots everywhere, yes, but Black people are not any more bigoted. And you can see it in the text that you have this long tradition of Black people already being intersectional in their activism, while white people explicitly are not on purpose. And yeah.
Yeah, that's a fantastic point.
Yeah, I think it's amazing how much of this is like, well, yeah, I mean, like Susan B. Anthony, like, was a capitalist. Like, so many of these people were already, I mean, like, you know, they're like fully bought in to white supremacy, even if they don't read it that way. And so it's like they can't imagine a society in which like someone doesn't lose. And so like,
yes,
they set the stage, like white people set the stage for whenever they're doing an activism, it's like somebody's just going to be cut out. That's fine. Yeah. We'll lie to that person. If we can get their support, we'll lie to that group until we get the thing that we want. And that's just how it is sometimes. Them's the breaks.
Yeah.
And, you know, what really stood out to me was that, like, Black women in organizing, like, understood, like, intersectionality before that was a word, just because they understood what it meant to push for collective liberation.
And
it didn't have to be, like, thought out.
Black women, sorry. So.
Oh, sorry, what was that?
Oh, intersectionality, the word itself, it, like, exists because of came up with it.
Right.
The same with liberatory identity politics, which is like a whole, unfortunately, hot button issue. But
you know, I just want to say that many people have said that you know, Black or non-white, non-men are going to lead any revolution, and it's always been very funny to me that white people are always like, what are you talking about? You don't know who's gonna lead the revolution. It could be any one of us, right? And the truth is that it's for reasons, and the reasons are not that you're like the only people that people will rally behind is a non-white, non-man. In fact, if anything, people have been trained to not listen to non-white, non-men, but rather the people who will be doing the most work, the people who will be understanding in the most deep way, the way to fix society is going to be non-white, non-men. So we're going to be led by, you know, people like y'all, because you simply know more. You know, the whole, you know what I mean? You just know more. And it's not, and the funny thing is, to me especially, is that doesn't have anything to do with, like, you know, specific facts from a history book that so many people seem to think is like the most important thing, but rather, like, people think that having a good SAT score makes you a good revolution leader. And that's like such garbage to me, right? Because obviously it's a deep understanding of the human condition. And we white folks, especially, like you said, this idea of somebody's got to win, somebody's got to lose, belies the fact that we don't understand the human condition, right? We have this completely fabricated view of the world that makes us bad to people and does not have anything to do with reality.
Yeah. And just being a nerd. And I honestly have never heard this word said out loud, so I might say it wrong. Don't make fun of me. But Pedagogy of the Oppressed by Paulo Freire. Mm-hmm. He talks about how being the oppressor dehumanizes you. And I think that is what's so important when we talk about white folks and this, like, inability, however you want to put it, to lead a revolution. But I think just being oppressive and oppressing other people takes away your sense of humanity and, like, sense of realness in the world. Which is why I think that, you know, it only makes sense for the people that are experiencing the worst of it to lead fixing it. Because, I mean, from looking through the camera, I can't tell you how to fix your house, but you can because you're living there right now. That's my truth.
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's like we are more primed to, like, lead just because, like, I don't think that it's that like a white person can't access like these places. I think that like it just takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of vulnerability and like really willing to like enter into community with others. And that's something that like most white folks don't have a lot of experience with.
You're
and
right. You're
and it's
absolutely
like
right.
and yeah, it's like and so like something that I feel just so like this is why I think that like the coming generation, I think a lot of y'all on the chat are like way younger than me. Like y'all are learning this stuff now. And so like we're kind of like the old heads and like you're so much more in touch like emotionally. And I think that, you know, it's like, it's kind of funny. I'm like looking a little bit in the chat when we talk about like what the revolution will look like. And, you know, it's kind of interesting to me as someone who like trains with a firearm, but I think that like the revolution is going to be so many different things outside of like, oh, I do think that like there will be armed struggle. Like I tend to think more about like the other pieces of the struggle that like are going to happen in tandem with that. So, I mean, it's like, what happens even after an armed struggle? And we're all just kind of sitting there like, welp.
Oh man, Doja Bird.
PTSD. Like,
well, sure.
What the fuck?
But also, there's the real revolution is after the armed struggle is over, and like every single communist leader has said that. And it's so funny to me how often we fetishize the revolution when there has not been a communist leader who has not said that the real revolution, the real difficult work, happens after the violent actions. Oh shit! Left Flank Vets is rating with 104 people. Okay.
Oh my gosh. What does that mean? That means that people like come into our channel, right?
Yes, exactly. Holy shit.
No.
Lorax, thank you. Thank you for subscribing. Holy shit. Yeah, we're gonna do some dancing, exactly. My terrible dance. So, okay, everybody from Left Flank, we are going over women, race, and class. I have on the line Shantilly and Doja Bird. We are talking about a lot of really good stuff. I hope y'all actually stick around because this is one of the ones that I have been hoping people would come watch. So, thanks, Conway. I appreciate that. I'm gonna get a shout out. Oh, thank you so much, Grim. I appreciate the shout out there. So, okay, let's get to the next one. Okay, wow, shit. Thank y'all for gifting subs.
Much is happening.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, it gets very distracting for a few seconds, and then it goes back to okay. But thank y'all so much for following. I really appreciate that. Okay. Yeah, let's get some howdies in the chat. Let's get some Gomer howdies in the chat to welcome in all the Jeep State people. So, working women, black women in the history of the suffragette movement. In 1870, women made up 1/4 of the non-farm workforce, and they make up almost all garment workers, and they are barred from most unions. So yet again, people are like, there's a huge amount of women who are working, and somehow they are banned from taking part in the one thing that they could do to get more agency in the workplace. So, one of the reasons that this comes up again and again, and I'll continue to bring it up and try to point it out, is I think Angela Davis is saying, hey, check it out. It's like sexism has a very specific link to capitalism. Sexism is a way for businesses to make money. Racism is a way for businesses to make money. And so big businesses specifically try to stoke the fires of this shit. And so they see that this is a wedge issue, a hot button issue, and it also helps them. So of course, they're going to hammer that button as hard as they can for decades and decades and decades. So until we unlearn some of this shit, we will never beat capitalism, because capitalism has a perfect tool in this shit for controlling us. So that's my soapbox, and I'll get off it real quick. Interestingly enough, in 1869, women were allowed in the National Colored Labor Union, and they specifically said they were not trying to make the mistakes of the past. And I thought that was just amazing. That it's like, look at this, yet again. Black people understanding that the struggle goes beyond race, white people not understanding, or white men especially not understanding that the struggle goes beyond class. Ain't this just wild? Women's suffrage passes, and immediately black women in the South are prevented from voting through lynch mobs and the resurgence of the KKK, or even election officials simply just turning them away. So right around the same time period, women's suffrage passed in I forget what year that was. It was later than the 1870s. But the gummy, you say it's never one thing, the shit is complex. Actually, I feel like it's pretty simple. But yeah, it's very interesting to see that, like, one, and I think the reason Angela Davis put these all together in this section is that it's showing really clearly all these things are linked. And it's linked in a very simple way, right? The vote, political agency, right, is purposefully stripped away from black people and stripped away from women, decade after decade. And a big part of that is for economic reasons. And it's so people always say, like, why does racism continue to exist in the United States? Why did lynch mobs try to specifically stop black women from voting whenever the voting laws passed? Like, why were black women singled out? And the answer is that we'll see later, I think, that these lynch mobs were not just started randomly. They don't just spark out of a bunch of white people. You know what I mean? It's not like, oh, hey, I'm white, you're white, hey, let's go form a lynch mob, right? No, there's y'all don't clip that. Please don't clip that. There is a 1920 for women's suffrage. Thank you so much. So yeah, the idea here is that politicians and these corporations, these really large corporations, work together to spark lynch mobs, to suppress women and to suppress black people time and time again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that this is really important too, because it's a stereotype that still persists today. You see it in media a lot of the time. Racism is portrayed as like one single, just really mean person that just like is hateful. Right. And that is sometimes how it is, but even these people are not just born hateful. They are trained to be hateful in a system because it makes money. And that part is always conveniently left out because, then hopefully people would not want capitalism.
Exactly. And I think they oftentimes leave it out because if it would be so damning if they showed these connections clearly, like it was the Carnegies, it was the Kellogg's, like these people who we talk about, who we hold up, who we name museums after, right? These people were sparking lynch mobs, right? So when you look at it like that, when you look at this history of time and time again, the people who are held up as like, the heroes of industry are in fact the true masterminds of racist violence in the United States. Man, it really makes the United States look bad.
And I think it's funny to show what a white supremacist capitalist state we are, that all the people on our money are like wildly racist. They are like, they pick so like true. The worst ones and they put them on our money.
So true.
And that's interesting.
We could, it's like, it is funny when you talk to people and you're like, we could have anybody on our money. We could have nobody on our money, but we could also have anybody. And we choose to have Andrew Jackson. Like, that's.
We can like put just buildings on the front and back of the money, even though Mount Rushmore trash. The people that we choose to highlight. It's just been a really funny week when you think about like the whole thing with Bill Gates and intellectual property, and they're like, you mean to tell me this wealthy man is a monster? And I'm just like, have we been experiencing the same country, or
Full on Patrick Star living underneath a rock.
I just don't get it.
I just think it's white blindness, right? I mean, it's just white blindness. It's plain and simple.
And they're like, there has to be a reason that Bill Gates feels this way, and he's making a lot of sense. I mean, it's amazing how many. I mean, it's not because the Soc Dems, bless. I hope they figure it out. You know, they're like, but the laws, and if you understand intellectual property, I'm like, no. Because I mean, this is the same thing that these like capitalists who spark these, you know, I almost said race riot mess. That's not what that is. Lynchings, murders, like they said, oh, well, you know, this is how it has to be. Yeah, like maybe it's a little sad, but they're gonna, you know, undermine the American, you know, whatever, insert like platitude. And it's just so interesting to me how much like they really leaned into this idea that like capitalism itself was not the problem, that it was just like, oh, we're just doing capitalism wrong sometimes.
Right. It's just crony capitalism.
And because we hear that now, you know, and like,
exactly,
you see those same arguments just, that's all I have to say.
So, I mean, that is, I think, like Shantilly and I talked about this a little bit, but that's like why this book is so important, is that it does show that it's not like none of this shit is new. This shit happens again and again. And it shouldn't be surprising. All right. So let's get to some happy stuff for a second. Okay. So this first slide is not that happy, but don't worry. We're going to get to happier stuff. Angela Davis has a section specifically on communist women and famous communist women who you maybe have not heard about. So yeah, let's get excited for it. Women were not a big part of the early Marxist movement. None of these early American Marxist parties really had that many women. It's not that they particularly barred them, but women were just not doing it. Right now, there's reasons for that, but we won't get into that too much right now. But interestingly, there was one party that was interested in it, which is the Socialist Party. They specifically advocated for women's suffrage. And then we'll also talk about the IWW, the International Workers of the World. All right. And that's still around. I'm probably going to join one day. Doja Bird, I think, no, it was Abby who told me to join, not you. Shout out to Abby. Shout out to Abby. Yes. Abby may even be in the chat. Abby comes sometimes. But IWW supported Black people's struggles specifically. Oh shit, Feminist Critique. Thank you for following. What's up, Wobblies in the chat? And then the Socialist Party actually started International Women's Day. So that was a bit of a buzz on communist Twitter, last month. But yeah, I thought that was really cool because I only learned about that a couple of years ago. But
was it originally called like Working Women's Day, or was it always just like International Women? Yeah, that was the thing that I think I learned on Twitter this year.
And then finally, I do think it's interesting that Eugene Debs was a kind of class reductionist, and he's always held up as this big, like, hero guy. I don't have too many bad things to say about Debs, but I also don't think that he necessarily needs to be held up as like king shit. Which is a lot of people think that's, a spicy thing to say. But anyway, I do have one thing.
People might be mad, but it's so interesting. A lot of times, I don't even know who that man is. I'm sorry to the man. I have no idea who that is. I'm gonna
I follow. There's a Twitter where they like share quotes from him. It's like anything. It's like, yeah, sometimes he's got some bars. And I'm like, wow, that's good. And I appreciate that Twitter exists to like keep that knowledge in the ether, But like, wow. Yeah, that quote is really, I mean.
He didn't say the black man either,
Right, yeah.
They never do.
So... Eugene, exactly. Squizzer Vorbis says he was a presidential candidate for the Socialist Party in the 1920s, and he ran from prison, which is pretty based.
That's cool.
But yeah.
Yeah.
Look at that. Jason Voorhees says Chantilly just pissed off half the white socialists in the US.
This isn't the issue. I was gonna say I'm sorry, but that would be a lie. It's just really interesting. I think that there's a lot of growth that I have to do in my politics, but also it's just wild to me how much people center these white folks and act like we have to know who they are. Because I'm a communist. I've never heard of this man. I'm still a communist. From reading of the history of Black people, that's how I got there. I just think it's interesting how much we think that people have to learn about these white folks to be a communist, when I am a testament to how that is not true. I just Googled Eugene Debs, though. I'm going to read about him.
Yeah, I mean, kind of sexy. No doubt.
Sometimes I get on my, a few years ago, I don't know how many, if y'all listen to like Vince Staples, but a few years ago, he was like, oh yeah, I don't listen to like old hip hop. I'm just kind of doing my own thing. And like people got so mad at him because they were like, how are you a rapper? And you're like doing this tradition. He's just like, I'm from the hood of like Long Beach. And I just like understand rap music. Like it's been around for a really long time. I also don't have to qualify myself to you. And like hip hop heads lost their minds. And I feel similarly sometimes where I'm just like, it's so weird. So like not to get deep into my life, but like my husband is your pretty standard like white leftist type who reads a lot of books about Russia. And he knows a lot of things about Russia. And so sometimes I'll just get to a point and he's like, oh yeah, that has a name and it's blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, okay, good to know. I arrived at that point all by myself. But I appreciate that Colin Ty said it once, I guess. Like, you know what I mean?
Oh, shit. I have heard, I just want to say in the chat, I'm not a complete cornbread. I have in fact heard North, so thank you.
Oh. Thank you. He's great. He was on episode Insecure too. Also, if we were going to talk about class reductionists, we could also get on a little bit about Lucy Parsons. That's my hot take land if people really wanted to get into it, which is that it's interesting that Lucy Parsons is in here and is noted as being a Black woman when she didn't identify as a Black woman. There's a lot of conversation about that in right now, especially in like Black anarchic spaces about like what that means. Like if you don't walk in Blackness and like it's not really considered as part of your analysis, like can you be part of like the Black anarchic tradition? And like that's something that I'm paying a lot of attention to, because like in Boston we have the Lucy Parsons Center, and like that's like one of our like main like organizing spaces. And I always like you know, I got like mad love for folks in the IWW, and I'm also really starting to like think more critically about like what does it mean to like can we claim someone as Black if they didn't want to be Black? Like what does that mean? I don't know.
I mean, interesting.
It's a conversation, you know. We're having it, we're talking about it. We'll probably never agree, you know. It's complicated. Lucy Parsons identify with dynamite. I mean, right? Like it's like there's that pressure to want to claim someone who's cool. You know, it's kind of like I mean, there's so many like mixed race Black people who don't identify as Black. Like I want to claim them anyway because I think they're very cool. It's like, but then it's like, well, if they don't claim that, can I push that identity on them? And like, yeah, it sucks.
I think it's really interesting. We talked a little bit beforehand, the gender bits of woman, race, class. And that just reminded me a lot. I'm currently captive genders, and there's this bit at the beginning that talks about how the language we have around gender is so culturally, it exists in the culture you live in and the time that you live place that you live in. And when we talk about our ancestors and we are trying to find our history as queer people, there's so many folks, like for me personally, oh my God, I'm having a brain fart. But there's so many folks that we want to project our current ideas of gender onto. And that's not what we identify as, or we don't know. Yeah, Frida Kahlo. A big one for me is Marsha P. Johnson. I think that it's interesting the way people talk about her. She did call herself a drag queen a lot. She did call herself trans at times, but she also used she, her, and he, him pronouns. So to just call her a trans woman, to me, I'm not personally, it's just interesting because you cannot push this identity on a person that unfortunately is no longer with us.
Yes.
Want to claim Marsha P. I love that for them. Go. But I don't think it's that simple.
That's really interesting stuff. So
just quickly, sorry, to tie it back to women, which I forgot to do, is, I don't know, I'm interested in how many of the people, if they were today that we're talking about, would they identify as women? If we were having the same conversations then that we are about gender right now, how many people do we talk about in the past and we call them cis women and cis men when in the reality that wasn't their gender identity, because the language is so different now. So it's interesting in reading Woman Race Class as something that is mixed and people see me as a woman and sometimes see me as a Black woman. I identify so much with everything that is said about Black women. And I feel so much kindred spirit and love for Black women, but I'm non-binary. So I just think that it's interesting in that text. Non-binary people can relate to stuff about cis women or cis men in whatever way feels comfortable for them, or folks outside of the gender binary. But when it comes to Woman Race Class, I do think that it's interesting. And I mean, I would love it if Angela Davis wrote an updated version that was a little more inclusive to other gender identities. And that's all I have to say.
Yeah, I mean, like, there was even a part in Women, Race, and Class earlier in the first section that I took a little bit of issue with, which was that, like, she says, like, specifically during slavery that, like, like rape was used as this tool. And I was just like, okay, well, you're making a statement that, like, Black men can't get raped, which I feel like it's like, we could talk about, like, if that happened a lot, if it was like a structural thing, like, but, in talking about that with a friend, they were just like, well, you have to recognize that at the time that this book was written, even, like, feminist discourse was this. And then, like, queer discourse existed as well, but they weren't, like, together. So that we can, like, be in this chat talking about it together and pointing out, it's like you center the woman, you center, like, womanhood, like, because that was the style. And so it's like Angela Davis is doing this, like, and to us it won't be, like, perfect because we're recognizing that, like, collective liberation even goes beyond, like, feminism in this, like, narrow definition of, like, feminism. And so, yeah, it's just like, I'm always thinking about that text. I think that, like, we tend to see text as, like, really static. And I'm always kind of thinking of it as, like, a conversation. Like, when I read something, I'm in conversation with it. And so it's like, I don't know, like, I can see, I guess what I'm getting at is that, like, we tend to think of time in this, like, really linear way. And so when I run up against things like this, I try to, like, let myself feel that time is not, like, linear, and that, like, these identities, like when we talk about Marsha P. Johnson, okay, well, like, this person is dead. But, like, what can I actually pull from that? What, like, is actually, like, what's the truth? What's the most true thing I can get to? Because I can't make a, like, fully universal statement about what I'm reading or someone's life. And that's just, like, a limitation of, I don't know, being on being in this plane of existence. I don't know. Now I'm getting too trippy, Elsa.
No,
wibbly wobbly, timey wimey.
Yes, thank you.
Well,
all
I want to say to that is that similar to what Shantilly was talking about on Twitter the other day of how, like, and please help me if I paraphrase you incorrectly, but the idea that you read Lenin and like a class reductionist can read Lenin and come away with a class reductionist point of view, can read it and never hear the other side. But a person who's non-white, or even a person who's not non-man, could read it and see the missing holes and see where Lenin was maybe saying something but not expounding on it in a perfect way. And so like the reader is as much a part of the message as the message itself.
Yes.
I've been thinking about it a lot, Chantilly, and thinking about the books that I've read. I mean, I always knew that like when a white boy like me reads Blood in My Eye, I'm going to get excited for the violence and be like, oh, it's so fucking awesome. You know what I mean? But then be like, but miss some of the things that are, key parts of the Black struggle that, George Jackson's talking about that I don't have the capacity to understand yet. Anyway, yeah. Sorry. Okay, so some highlights. Lucy Parsons, who may or may not have been Black, was one of the first women to join the IWW along with Mother Jones. She spoke about sex workers being specifically a part of labor and that their labor is labor, right? And fought for them at the IWW, which I think is fantastic. Anita Whitney, that's the one on the top right, one of the few white women who agitated specifically against lynching. And it's really funny because as I was writing this, I was like, man, we don't need to be giving out cookies for just, being a decent person. But, being one of the few white women at the time to not be a shitheel, I guess is good. You know what I mean?
Oh.
Then we got Elizabeth Gurley Flynn, bottom left, high-level IWW organizer, really enjoying specifically because of how much the IWW cared about Black people. And look at that picture. I mean, one thing I think about all the time when I see some of these pictures of people speaking in the past is like, these people look fiery. These people look like normal-ass people who are in a crowd of normal people, and they're speaking about real shit. And I just think of myself like, I just hadn't seen that in the last few years. You know what I mean? I've seen people kind of talking at protests and stuff, but it's always kind of spontaneous, or it's extremely polished and is opportunistic. And I just don't see any in between. I do not see normal people who are not very obviously establishment shills doing anything but extemporaneous, off the cuff talking and sometimes tripping over themselves and and that's fine. Like, it's good, but it's also like there was this tradition in the past of this mid-level organizing, where you're not part of an NGO. You still have a regular ass job, but you're going out and you're trying to get people organized. And I just fucking, I have this like, I don't know, this yearning to get back there,
Yeah. Those people still exist. They're out there and about there. But yeah. I personally had some time where I was working with the I was just there. They are amazing. I had very little to do. I just was there. The Coalition of Immokalee Workers, they're a union by farm workers for farm workers. And the way when folks are speaking, it's like mind-blowing, and it's so heartfelt and it's beautiful. And I think, once again, to go back to what we were talking about earlier, it's so important when people that are connected to the struggle are organizing for their own freedom. There's real power there in this like revolutionary emotion and passion.
Hell yeah, absolutely. Hell yeah.
And don't eat at Wendy's. That's all.
Fuck Wendy's. That reminds me of a Sage Francis song. At the end of it, he's like, he gets done rapping. He's like, also fuck McDonald's.
Yeah. Reasonable.
Claudia Jones fought specifically for domestic workers to be recognized by trade unions and progressives, because that's like, and we talked about this 2 weeks ago with Doja Bird on the line, is that these trade unions and progressives specifically did not include domestic workers. And it was in part because of how, because of misogyny and because of racism, because black women made up 70% of the workforce for domestic workers. So, hey, Comrade Clever Name, somebody give a shout out to Comrade Clever Name. So yeah, I just think that's fantastic. These people who have been thinking about this shit from the get-go, from the 1850s. And sometimes we have this tendency to be like, oh, people should get paid for housework and act like that's like a new and revolutionary idea. It's like, no, 150 years they've been talking about that. All right. Oh, where did my trigger warning go? Fuck.
Yeah, I was going to say that because there's new people now.
Okay, hold on. I'm sorry. I had a fucking... I apologize. I had a trigger warning and it went somewhere. We're about to talk about the myth of the black rapist. So trigger warning for sexual assault, and also for all the new people, thank you. I'm sorry, Shantilly. Whenever they rated, I should have done a trigger warning.
But I also just remembered. So...
So yeah, things are going to get a little bit heavy for a little while. Oh, look at that. Comrade John says, hello, Shantilly. We are going to talk openly about it, and get through it. But yeah, thank you, Lupe. I appreciate that. But yeah, it does get real here for a second. Okay, so rape, racism, and the myth of the black rapist. So we've been talking about violence against black people, so the trigger warning for violence has not come off, but specifically we're going to talk about how rape has been used as a tool of white racists, and rape has been used as a tool to get white people willing to lynch black people, because it takes a certain amount of hurting your soul to get in that mind frame to be willing to kill another human being. People had to be whipped up into it. It's not something that just like you can just, it may seem sometimes like you can just turn on the race button with white people and make them ready to kill anybody. But, it does require a destruction of your own humanity to do some of these things. So yeah, the black rapist myth has been used basically anytime a capitalist needs violence against black people. And why do I say a capitalist in particular? Because it is seen in places like when certain areas have a very strong organizer or something who is getting all the black people in the area whipped up and ready to fight for higher wages in particular. And this is something that Angela Davis pointed out in the book, is that it was oftentimes whenever they were fighting for higher wages, right? And it was like, she talks specifically about, the Kellogg's and the Carnegies later on supporting eugenics and supporting some of the, some of this stuff as well. But that was something that I thought was so fascinating, is that like you can literally draw a line between black people asking for more wages and then the white people talking about a black rapist in the area, and then a black person getting lynched, and black people not sitting down and taking it, black people, getting like trying to fight for their rights, and then like lynchings continuing. And then so like it's these things are not isolated incidences, and they are not they're not by accident.
And I will say, and this is something that bothers me about the ways that people talk about Fred Hampton and MLK, is that Martin Luther King Jr. was killed right after making a strong and purposeful pivot into organizing by class, and talking about how people needed to get paid better wages. And he was murdered by the state shortly after. And you see Fred Hampton, who was openly talking about a international proletariat revolution. And he was also murdered by the state. This is a long American tradition of violence against Black people, but purposefully because they want to extort as much labor from us for as little money as possible. And that has made everyone suffer, because also white people are not getting, everybody but rich people are not getting paid enough money, right? And it is through this extortionist, violent tradition
Yes, absolutely, Chantilly. Absolutely. And I mean, I think I even like exactly what you just said. I think I talk about that in the next slide because it's such a good point. But let me just crank through this one real quick. So, specifically, when we say the myth of the black rapist, what we mean is that it's this lie that black men are driven to rape and that they are specifically animalistically driven to rape white women. And so, you know, there's this thing of like anytime a black man is seen dating a white woman or a white woman, or anytime, like even like talking about like Emmett Till, like flirting with a white woman allegedly, right? There is this willingness to murder, and a big part of that is that this myth of the black rapist has been told generation after generation. So white people from birth basically are taught about how animalistic and ready to rape black men are. And unfortunately, it also has this opposite end of the coin, which is that if black men are all rapists, then black women are loose. And some of this stuff is real rough to say, so I'm sorry y'all in advance, because I mean, obviously I don't believe this shit, but yeah, used, damaged goods, and it normalizes violence against black women. And that is something that happens now, like there's the whole concept of the less dead, where police for forever, the last 5 decades, have not investigated black women's deaths, but especially sex worker deaths. There is the underreporting of violence against women, but especially underreporting of violence against non-white women. And so black women were not active in the anti-rape movement. Like the feminist movement has had many different subsections of the feminist movement, and Angela Davis talks about the times when black women were specifically missing. And a big part of that is these movements, this, like, for example, this anti-rape movement propagated the lie of the black rapist. Like some of the luminaries, the head people of this movement were part of promulgating this and making it seem like it's science, right? So yeah, of course, if your brother or your dad or your friend was falsely accused of rape and lynched, and someone is trying to tell you, oh yeah, that's true, like black people just do that, why would you want to join their club? So there's all this talk of like, oh, why are they not, like, they obviously need it too. Why are they not interested in this? Why can't we get black people to join our club? And Chantilly, you've talked about this idea of like, if your club has no black people, you need to figure out why. If your movement is missing black people, there is a reason, and it is white supremacy, to say the very least, and you need to work on it. I mean, I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, I mean, that's about it. But I think it's interesting. And once again, to bring up for the millionth time, how much of the things that Davis talks about in this book, how it's like, oh, that's been happening. It always happens. Because, yeah, just from my personal experience, a lot of times, like if I will enter space that doesn't have a lot of black people, a leftist or an organizer space, it's really wild the amount of times immediately that people say, why don't black people come here? And I'm like, well, first of all, I hope you don't ask every black person that comes here that question.
Oh my God.
Why? But second of all, I mean, it's wild how much of implicit bias comes out, and like white people just don't realize it. Is that you will say and do racist things and not even notice. And it's like, well, I mean, I noticed, and why would I come back here? Or even beyond that, if I'm looking at your goals and you're not explicitly stating how you are helping black people, I don't know how you could not be doing that, Yeah.
Yeah,
it seems like so much of it is like when you talk about, I mean, it's kind of like the thing with Debs, right? When he's just like, we don't have anything specific here for black people. Like, there's in a lot of movement spaces, it's like, okay, well, if we raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour, that also helps black people. It's like, okay, I understand the way money works. Like, I don't like, but that's not, it's like, that's not the question that I'm asking you.
Right.
I have the, in my like real job, I work in communications and I primarily work in like PR outreach. And because I am a queer Black woman who works in outreach, one of the questions I get is, it's like the second I walk into a room, someone's like, how do we get Black people to show up? And I'm just like, what do you have for Black people? And it's always this like, it's like, wait, like you want us to have something specific? It's like, yeah, like just, I mean, anything that shows that you're actually like thinking about us, like truly, like, I don't know. It's so hard to talk about things like that without like naming specific organizations. I just won't do that. I want to.
Shit, you can do it. Talk about them. We.
Oh my god!
I burned all the bridges I have with organizations.
I too am withholding tea.
Well, see, that's the thing. It's like it's so tough because it's just like you don't want to. It's like, how can I say that I had this experience and like people not think that it's like a universal experience, or that it is indicative of like that organization can like never change or like whatever.
Fair.
But like, yeah, it's challenging when you're talking about like inviting people of color and like they want people of color who still think like white people.
I'm really
that's what they get. And so then it's like when my Black ass shows up, like already, like I listen to Modest Mouse. So like I'm a questionable Black person. And no, I'm playing. Modest Mouse is great. Buck Isaacs. But like I'm always curious. It's like, what do you have for like my community? And when the person's like, well, we need you, like now that you're here, oh God, now that you're here, like you need to be the one to lead outreach. It's like, what if I just wanted to join to like do childcare? Or what if I'm actually like a super academic? Like, why is it that because I'm Black, I also have to take on like the like reaching out to people of color pieces and explaining like that I feel like are, it's not even, it's like basic, but it's just like we have classes, we have streams like this. We have like people read the articles, but I always wonder if they're like internalizing what we're saying and like really like putting it into like when they're identifying SMART goals or whatever the fuck, like they're actually like thinking about us. And it seems like instead of thinking about us, they just wait for one of us to show up. So it's like, oh, thank God, now that you're here, like you'll just know exactly what to do. And it's a really tough place to be in. Yeah, because like I think like a Black person. And so some of my ideas around like outreach or just like what can be done to make a space inclusive are things that like a lot of white folks pretty immediately go like, ugh, well, I don't want to do that. And I'm just like, well, okay, then fuck you, fine. Like, and don't say that you want us because you actually don't want to do the work of like creating an inclusive environment where we want to be here. And so it's like, when you do that, then don't look around and say, oh, why aren't these people here? I mean, it's like, it's just really ridiculous. It's a ridiculous time to organize.
And I will say really quickly, and I will withhold information because this isn't my story, is something that really stood out to me. A friend was telling me they were in this organizing space and they're like, how do we get Black people to come here? And they were like, oh, well, let's just go to this park. It's in a Black neighborhood. I do stuff in my other work here all the time. And people were afraid to go there. That's why Black people don't show up.
Yeah. So they're like, oh, can you go and distribute flyers? And it's like, no. It was like, so you're going to tell me outright that you think this neighborhood is dangerous. And then you're just going to be like, but it's okay for you to go. Like, why? Like, that's so ridiculous. Like, also, no neighborhoods are dangerous. Like, what are you even talking about? And it's just like, and also the idea, something I struggle a lot with, I tend to be the first Black person to show up in certain spaces because like where my politics are, I'm like just there. And I recognize pretty immediately when the space has some stuff that it needs to work on. So when they're like, oh, let's recruit more BIPOC, I'm like, why on earth would I want to bring them here to have to interact with you?
There's so many times where people are like, if you know any, like they don't say Black people, they mean bring them through. And I was like, I'm never coming back here. You think I'm going to come back with more people?
They would hate that, actually. They would not like that. I like when they pause before they go African American. That's my favorite.
Yeah.
You be like, I'll be saying Black this, Black that, and they'll be like, yeah, well, the thing I think African Americans, you heard me saying Black. You can say Black. It's okay.
I always think of that tweet where it was like someone was like, oh, my history teacher just called Black people like in Africa African Americans, but like
oh my god,
disaster.
I was like, I can go on about this for hours, but we'll
yes,
yeah. I'll talk about it later, and then I'll name organizations. I'll name.
It's all
as I said, I don't
know. It's all of them.
It's like as I said, I don't want people to hear something from me and then think like, oh, that's indicative of like the organization forever and ever. Because like if that were the case, and when we were talking about the IWW, I would have said something. But like I think that I can have an experience. I'm always open to change. I'm always open to an organization doing better and changing. And so I am hesitant to say something that like doesn't honor that is available to them at any given time. Do better.
Damn.
So yeah, I guess back to our slides. I don't know.
I just want to say, like, hey chat, if y'all don't think this is about you, it is about you. You know what I'm saying? Like we like this is one of the things that, white people like me in particular, like what I say is, hey, you have definitely done this. Whatever they're saying right now, take this whole ass list of things and say, you've done it. Watch out for it next time. Yes, Grim, internalized, exactly. Just start from not getting defensive, please, because it's really embarrassing. I'll be honest, it's really embarrassing whenever you start thinking about all the time, like whenever like the things y'all are saying and you think back like, fuck man, I've done that. Fuck. It's just like, be better. Just don't do it. Don't do it again. So anyway, thank y'all for going off on that.
Yeah, it's like you just keep trying, it's like it can everything. I think that like, what is it? I mean, it gets said a lot, especially in like the more like holistic organizing spaces I'm in, but it's like establish when you're in an org together or when you're just doing work together, like we're a learning community. We're going to learn from each other. It's not going to all be reading like State and Rev. Like it's going to be learning things about each other. And like, I think that something like outreach, like that's something that we all do together, because if you're saying, oh, I want you to bring in people, this is the thing that bothers me too. And I'll say it, I'll name the org in this limited space. So like when I was a member of the SRA, there were a lot of conversations about like, how do we get more BIPOC in our chapter? And I ended up talking with someone. They were like, oh, I want to reach out to this guy because he runs, he's a Black, like, firearms instructor. He's listed on this like resource, and I don't know what it is. I think it was just specifically like African-American like firearms instructors. And I had an interaction with that guy like 2 years ago. And the thing that the guy did that bugged me was he was supposed to be running a class that was specifically for Black women. And when I went to sign, I was about to sign up. Like I was going to pay this dude like $200. Okay. Because I was like, I want to learn how to shoot with other Black women because like I have a lot of problems with white women. We've been reading this book, but I also have a personal history of problems with white women. And right before I signed up, I saw in the like Facebook event, yes, this was not very secure, I know, a Facebook event, that he had invited a white woman to join. And so I said so we had some words, because I was just like, if you're running a class that is specifically for Black women, like, you can't say that it's okay for a white woman to join without asking the people who are giving you money. And like, if you're a Black man, like, I was like, do you not understand this? And he did not understand this. He did not, y'all. The exchange was heated. And so I was saying to this person in the SRA, I was just like, I don't want to interact with that Black man. He's not the kind of Black man. I don't care what his politics are. Like, he showed me that he's not a safe person, that he's going to accept money over creating a safe environment. And like, I don't like that. And then the conversation kind of went all these places where it was like, well, you know, but we want to recruit people of color. Where do we find them? And I was just like, you know, I don't know where we're going to find them, but I know that it's not him. I don't think that Black people live us anywhere that we want to be. Sorry, what was that?
Oh, I'm sorry. I was like, you think that like all Black people live under like a bridge in a mythical forest?
Right?
Where do we find Black people?
Where do we find the Blacks? Like, and it was just like, I get the idea, but to me, the thing that was like so telling about it was this idea of like, I'm going to do a Google search to find Black gun owner type people to try to get into this org, instead of, do you not personally know any Black people?
And that's the red flag.
We live in the Boston area, and I'm very concerned about the fact that so few of you know any Black people. Walk me through how that happens.
You know
what I mean?
Let me tell you one thing about that. You know, so I did the whole, I know we got to get going on these slides. I apologize, but I just want to say one more thing. The number of times that people have said, hey, I'm really interested in the radical reparations thing. You know, the thing that, for y'all in chat who don't know, it's a website where it's like talking about how if you're white and you have means, you have a little bit of money, then, you know, it's good. It's maybe even necessary for you to help arm your, Smith, for you to help arm your non-white, specifically, you know, your Black comrades, that like, you know, it's something that maybe is even, you could consider your responsibility. That if they want it and don't have the means, that a part of the reason you do have the means is because of all of the white generational wealth and the white privilege that you've been afforded. So anyway, a lot of people, getting timed out, buddy. You may be all right, and I may get in trouble for this, but you getting timed out. Okay, so anyway, the number of people.
Yeah, I feel bad. I can't see the chat because my computer's being wonky. So I feel like if anyone's talking to me, I'm really sorry.
Oh, no,
I'm trying, but yeah, I don't know what that was about. But
yeah,
yeah.
The idea that people will come to me, white people especially, and they'll be like, I want to take part in this. This seems like such a beautiful thing to do, such a good thing to do. And I'll be like, okay, great. So talk to your Black friends and see if any of them are in that position. First, that's the first thing you do. And they'll be like, and there's that moment, you know what I mean? There's that moment of like, okay, you don't have to say anything. I understand right now that you have no Black friends. This is literally like, you don't have to say anything from here on. And it's like, buddy, I don't know how to help you. That's like, maybe before you start thinking about buying guns for Black people, you need to start thinking about making a few friends who are Black. Like that may be the first step, you know?
Right.
So,
because I mean, it's like especially in the model, and we could talk about this forever, like community defense. It's like, have you ever considered that buying guns for BIPOC could mean buying guns for your friends, like in building a defensive community together?
Yes.
That's very Rainbow Coalition. Come on, y'all.
And
it just doesn't click.
And that's the thing. Like
it's just like, I just can't explain how disappointed I am when I like end up in that conversation, because it's just like, what I think it really gets at is it goes back to that like lack of vulnerability with white people. Like, it's like, okay, well, I know this black, it's like, okay, well, I know this black guy at work, but I don't really know like what his politics are. I don't really know. And it's that kind of like, I think it's all, well, not, I think it's another thing. It's part of white supremacy culture. It's this sense of urgency. So it's like, I'm going to reach out to you because I want to like put a gun in a black communist's hands today. And because it's like, I want to do that. I want to do that instead of letting it be a long-term goal. Like what if you thought about it as like, I'm going to talk to that black person at work who said that they like Judas and the Black Messiah, and like see if that person is someone that I can like build their consciousness, and then in 2 years you can give them a gun.
You are, yes.
It's a novel thought, really.
You are I mean, Doja,
it's reactionary.
It is reactionary.
And it's like this like neoliberal tradition of, it's like white savior weirdo stuff, you know? Yeah. Instead of actually going into your own community and trying to talk to people and together improve your material conditions, you just want to find a random like black person you can be charitable towards, which is very strange.
Do a little, like feel a little bit like John Brown in the process is how I always kind of read it. And it's just like, it's just so awkward. And I feel bad because like, sometimes I feel bad because it's like all of my advice when it comes to outreach really is that like, you can't do outreach that isn't also like internal work. So it's like, if you want to reach out to a particular like population demographic, whatever word you want to use, like you have to be willing to build the skill set to be equipped to do that before the first brown person walks into your org and you're like, oh, so excited you're here. We've been thinking about doing this. Like that, like you should already have a plan in place. You should already be doing that work. These people shouldn't have to find you. Like you should be present in the community already if you actually give a shit. But if you don't, you know, it's like, I feel like there's a lot of pressure in leftist spaces for people to care about like reaching out to people of color. And it's just like, if you're not going to do it in a way that's actually like heartfelt, like where you actually care instead of just like, oh, everyone's telling me to care, this is the trend, like, then don't do it. Like, because you don't actually care. And like, that's just maybe, I don't know, maybe it's just not for you to do. Like, go away, leave us alone. Don't bring this to us. Like, and yeah, that's all I'm gonna say about that.
Yeah, right on, Doja. Appreciate it. If there's one thing this radical reparations thing has shown me is that that kind of people don't want to do that kind of groundwork, that they're terrified of having a long-term goal, and they're terrified of just like having vague things that they just can't throw money at. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it's scary. It's so funny. It's scarier for me to tell them, go make a friend, and then you'll have to train them. You'll have to like spend time with them. You'll have to make sure that it's safe, right? Without being paternalistic, you're going to have to, you know what I mean? Like you're going to have to find that. And like I start listing off these things that are like interrelational kind of things, and people just like, and they're like, oh fuck no, I just thought I could give somebody $600 and get them a rifle. Like,
yeah, it's a relational piece. It's really and it's so hard because I feel like this again is something that I experienced, you know, in the SRA, which is that like, honestly, the chapter that I was in was one of the strongest chapters. We were able to get a lot of work done, but only because we did a lot of work to build affinity with each other. But as we grew in numbers, that affinity was harder and harder to foster. And of course, like the pandemic. And so that was like really challenging. But it's like, and I always feel, because anytime I like made a conversation more emotional, people would just like reach out. And that's what I'm saying. It's just like people actually do want that human connection. Like we do want authentic friendships. I think that's just like part of being a person. But it's really challenging work. And I don't doubt people's sincerity, but I think that the centering of fear is really common in like communist spaces. It's exacerbated by our history of being targeted, COINTELPRO. And I think it's really easy for us to retreat into ourselves and call it OPSEC or whatever we want to call it. And so it's just like, if you make a commitment, if I guess the thing that I would say to anyone in the chat or anyone here is just like, if you want to make a commitment to like reaching out to people who are different than you, like recognize that part of that is that like that person is going to want to get to know you, and that like I can't trust, I know there's some trolls or whatever y'all call them, dingbats, like in the chat, but I trust that every one of you has something to offer in a friendship. And like you can build on that. And that's like how revolution is going to get done in part. Which is, yeah, I guess also why I'm here on this stream trying to figure out what y'all are doing. And on Twitter trying to figure out what y'all are doing.
Oh, shit, dude.
It's like, we can do it. But anyway, that's it.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you both. I appreciate that sidebar. Okay, so sorry, I got to get back to something that, and this is, it's still rough, y'all. So trigger warning still in effect. Okay, so sexual coercion was a central part of slavery, right? And Angela Davis even says that it defined the relationship between the master and slave. That sexual coercion was not an accident. That to own someone's body could be proven, and it was exemplified by sexual coercion. And so, of course, mob violence by whites, because it has come from this act of trying to retake away the rights, or to relimit the rights of black people, has always included a sexual violence aspect, because it just goes back to the old concepts, right? So like, this is not stuff that's taught in textbook. There's no like, here's how to be a white supremacist and how to be terrible to people, right? But it's, some of this shit is kind of obvious. Like, and when I was reading it, I was like, fuck, of course. Like, this is terrible, but also it just, of course. So yeah, Angela Davis goes through several different instances of like, hey, check it out. There was black people trying to get some rights. There was a lynch mob formed. There was sexual violence. There was the myth of the black rapist was used, and she was like, happened here, 1866, happened here, 1871, just like went bam, bam, bam. Like there were several different examples, and I was like, wow, this, John Birch Society publishes How to Be Terrible Materials. Fair enough. But yeah, businesses, like when we talk about Reconstruction in particular, there was kind of like she even calls it a colonization of the South. And I think this was a very interesting idea for me, is this idea of like political borders really don't mean anything, right? So what you have is an industrialized base that has beaten an agricultural area in a war. And yes, getting rid of slavery, what Abraham Lincoln did there is like, yes, that's important. We're not saying that the Civil War was about states' rights or some shit like that. But on the other hand, the North was not doing this out of the goodness of their heart. And there was business, like it was big business fighting big business. It was industrial business fighting agricultural business, and slaves were used as a pawn, right? So of course, after one side wins, right, which is the same thing that happened in the Revolutionary War. It was not like some highfalutin ideals thing. It was a new type. Like, I will try not to get overly communist in this shit, but there was absolutely, thank you, Shantilly. there was absolutely a change going on in the means of production, in the way that things were built, that things were getting away from the cottage industry. And so these new rich people in the new world were getting away from the old monarchic model of land ownership and guilds. And so they had a revolution. Well, this is exactly what happened. Why do you think the cotton gin spurned on the Civil War? Because it mechanized a major part of agriculture. And it changed the relation, like the way that slaves were used became more and more difficult, as in like they accelerated the process of using up people in order to keep up with this new technology, right? So they had to like a big part of like the reason it stuck, as in like the reason why slavery wasn't reintroduced, is not because people became good people. It is never because people became good people. It's because they found a new way of doing labor that was able to exploit people without owning people, and it actually turned out to be more efficient. Now, y'all in the chat may think that that's very dark, and I would love to hear if anything that I said y'all don't agree with, Shantilly or Doja Bird, please please correct me.
The only thought that I had, and it's not a correction at all, is that's the real capitalistic innovation. It's just how do we exploit people better? It's not how do we, they're like smartphones, capitalistic innovation.
No, it's not.
It's how to exploit people better. How to make people's lives worse for your profit better. To do that more.
Exactly. And it's the pressures of capitalism, right? It certainly there are evil people in capitalism who just love doing that shit and they get off on it, right? But the point is, when you got two businesses and one business finds a way to exploit its people better and extract more of that labor value, right? Then they do better than the other businesses. So it forces out anybody who's not exploiting the shit out of their people loses. And so capitalism creates monsters by design. It could not but create monsters. How do I get such cool guests? I have friends, Abby.
I don't know if Abby was here. I'm like, you did a shout out earlier, did we not?
No, that's a different Abby. There's a lot of common
different
Abbies.
Abby. Well, different Abby. We are now friends.
Yeah, Abby, if you don't, I'm sure you follow Shantilly, but if you don't follow Shantilly and Doja Bird, you really should. How do I get friends? Lost in Nowhere. We can have a different, maybe next Tuesday, if I do a stream, I'll talk about how to get friends. But yeah, one last final thing here, before we get to some nice pictures, some eye bleach, if you will. Racism, especially the teaching of acceptance of rape and lynching, warps white children's minds. And white parents purposefully warped white children's minds by taking them to lynchings, by exposing them to this violence, like under slavery, but as well as after, whenever they had y'all, I didn't include all the numbers in this, but literally hundreds of thousands of people were murdered after the Civil War. In the decades after the Civil War, there was, I ain't telling you, Shantilly and Doja Bird, anything new, but yeah, in the chat, lynchings were not like a couple here and there across the United States. It was systemic. It was purposeful. They these capitalists got together and talked to each other about how they could get lynchings going in their state, And
I just want to quickly say, I feel very strongly about this. Just to put it into perspective, because I think sometimes when we talk about slavery and when we talk about lynching, it seems like something in the distant past. Personally, once again, I get really emotional when I talk about this. But I remember growing up, I heard stories. My grandma, when she was a child, she woke up one day and her best friend had just been lynched. That was like the reality of her life. And so it's not like these things are not still happening, or not like these things did not happen recently and don't really affect people that you know, or even yourself.
Yeah.
I always think it's a funny question to ask white people, to tell them to ask what their parents were doing, to ask your parents what they were doing during their civil rights movement.
Absolutely.
Because it wasn't long ago,
I think about that quite a bit. And I talk about my grandparents sometimes, and my grandparents living in the South and being the type people they were. It's like, I know y'all didn't tell me everything. I know y'all got up to some shit. You know what I mean? Especially as much as you love the fact that we're related to a founding father, which, by nature means we were related to fucking, like the worst possible people on earth. Right. Like, anyway. So anyway, I'm sorry. Hey, look at this. Here's some nice pictures. Some eye bleach for y'all. Check it out. After the Emancipation Proclamation, Black people actually being, there was a period where before, like, Jim Crow was not a monolithic thing that happened one time, right? Like, Jim Crow kind of came and went several times. There's like this whole process to it. So yeah, Black people absolutely were in court and such, and we're like organizing activists. We're law people. We're desperately trying to get education so that they would not be re-enslaved. Something that Angela Davis talks about several times, and I just love the fact that there's actual like engravings that show like Angela Davis ain't making this up. Black people were really trying to do this stuff, You got, I thought, another really beautiful picture of, just a family during Reconstruction. And then on the far right, another family during Reconstruction. And like just the idea of like, yeah, Black people were seen as humans and were worth taking pictures of. And like you have a regular family that are struggling, that are, living, like, you can just see the pride on people's faces in their own family in these pictures. And I just love that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, one of my favorite things is every once in a while, I guess people I follow, I'll see like a thread that's like Black lesbians throughout history, and I'm like, this is everything I ever need.
Hell yeah.
Good for them.
Okay, so we're getting in on the close to the end. We got 2 chapters left, so thank y'all for sticking with me. Okay, racism, birth control, and reproductive rights. Black people have not been a huge part of the feminist birth control movement. Why? Why is that? Well, very, very simple answer. A very simple answer, which is that Black people have been subjected to forced sterilization. And the feminist birth control movement has been specifically eugenicist. That white women got together and said, hey, let's make sure Black people can't have babies. And I mean, when I was reading this chapter, I was like, what the fuck? Like, again and again, because I was like, because the statistics are just unbelievable. So yeah, 1932, 26 states had forced sterilization laws. So if you were too poor, if you had mental issues, anything, they would forcibly sterilize you before they would treat you. 35% of Puerto Rican women in 1970s were sterilized forcibly by the government, by the U.S. government. Doesn't that hurt the labor pool? Gumex, I will say this. Of course, it hurts the labor pool, but you have different things. The forces of racism are not always logical. And when you have, I'm sure that the big time capitalists at the top were not super happy about some of these concepts. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, maybe y'all know better than me, but racism had already infected the minds to a very deep level of these organizers at the lower, these feminist organizers for decades, right? So when you especially start talking about race suicide, right, then white people start getting really worried about they're going to fucking get killed as they're going to get genocided as a group just by not having babies. And they see the statistic that non-white people have more babies, and it just makes it hits this part of a white supremacist brain that says we got to stop this, right? So yeah, I think in all cases there's a tension of white supremacy. I talked about this on Twitter the other day, where you want to crank, like, not you, the businesses want to crank the white supremacy up just enough to where you can make people be okay with their shitty wages as long as Black people are getting worse wages. But you don't want to crank it up so much that you have white people going, full fascist in the streets, like you do have sometimes. And so what happens is it's like a steam gauge. You know what I mean? They turn it up a little bit, and you'll have like these instances of extreme white violence, white terrorism, and then the government says, "Oh shit, we got to dial this back a little bit." So that's my impression.
Yes, I will say two things.
Yes.
One, in response to that question, I think that is a testament to why class reductionism is bad. I think that a lot of times people will say, well, if we seize the means, then everyone will be fine. Like maybe a racism will happen sometimes, but Black people will own the means of production, so they'll be fine. Well, it doesn't always work like that, even though it's not good to not have people have babies, because then they're racism does wild stuff, like you were saying. And two, this was actually brought on by industrialization. Is what happened is because of industrialization, there are less people working on farms, and the only reason people were having so many children is because they're free labor sources to work your farm for you. So as people are moving into urban places, they don't need as many children because they aren't on a farm anymore, and also more expensive. They're not, when they're working on your farm, they're paying for themselves. So what was happening is Black people were still working on farms, and white people were having less babies. And then I cannot remember which president, it was in the text, I don't know if Gomer remembers or if Doja remembers, was like, oh no, Black people are having more babies than white people. And that's where you get this whole thing about a white genocide, because Black people are having more children than them. So then they responded with an actual genocide.
Yes. And what I forgot one other thing here that Angela Davis talks about is the idea that sometimes they do this kind of stuff, and the point is you keep as long as the super exploitation of Black people is kept up, as long as the super exploitation of women is kept up, then that's the important thing. So yeah, you'll have some of this other stuff happen, but a part of it is keep Black people scared, keep women scared, and then you can just take more money from them. So, I mean, do you think that has, like, forced sterilization is terrifying, right? Like that's one of the worst things you can do to somebody. So, I mean, I just feel like maybe that was a part of it. The point was to be terrible and racist from a governmental standpoint to keep people subjugated. Does that sound accurate?
100%. It also sends a message. I mean, why do you think that they publicly execute Black people on the regular? I know me personally, as we were having more protests around after last summer, Black Lives Matter like erupted for, I guess, everyone else. Because I'm like, it's interesting because I'm like, Black Lives Matter it existed for quite a long time. It's interesting what made everyone else suddenly care, but that's a whole other conversation. Is personally, like, I was having these conversations with myself now when we are going to actions. I have to ask myself, like, because I see Black people get publicly executed so much, how comfortable do I feel putting myself out there? And I mean, like, on Twitter and stuff, my name and my face is on everything. I love to talk about my family. I have cute siblings. I don't post them because I would never want to bring any harm their way being a public Black communist, because I know what happens to Black communists, Yeah. And that's reality.
For sure.
I wanted to like highlight, this is really hard to, so I read a book last year. It's called Superior, and it's about race science. And like in the 30s, like that was just like in full swing. It's like in the same way that, it's like there were abolitionists who were like, yeah, we feel that this is morally wrong. But then you had like those abolitionists that were like, yeah, and we're going to send all the Black people to Liberia. Like at this time period, like whiteness was being created. And in the creation of like, it was like trying to decide what whiteness was. They were deciding what it was not for sure. Which is, I mean, where you get the sterilization of Puerto Rican women. Like, these are all, it's like, it doesn't make sense for like a labor force, but it does make sense when you're talking about these threads that we've read in this book about like the future of the white race and like all this talk about like morality and purity and like it's really also, I feel like, deeply tied to this Christian idea of like, and like this is like part of why people have that argument about like Planned Parenthood and Margaret Sanger and if she was a racist. It's like this very like, well, she wasn't a racist. She just thought that like Black people were having too many children and that they couldn't afford to have them.
That's racist.
But like she never, yeah, because she did not care about Black people having access to resources by which they could support their children. It was that Black people were doing wrong by not having enough money, resources to support the many children that they had. And so it's like, it was like very much like, I mean, that's the nonprofit world though, isn't it? It's like, oh, I'm going to solve this one problem because I see people doing this one thing that I don't like. And it's never evaluating like these bigger structures. So it's like Margaret Sanger is like talking about reproductive rights, but like in that, when we're talking about rights, it's like, who has the right to make people? And when we've already established that, well, then it's really easy then to talk about like who shouldn't reproduce. And you know, it's like, I think what really strikes me about this particular section is, you know, as someone who is the mother of a child that like actually people told me to get an abortion, and like I won't get into all that, but it's like people think that like access to abortion is the like end all of like reproductive rights, which is why like a lot of people have been doing work. I mean, that's what we call like reproductive justice, because it's not just about like the right to do something. It's also about like, what does justice look like for these different groups of people? And so like, because in my own personal story, because I was pregnant, and to people who weren't me, the situation seemed very not ideal. It wasn't actually ideal to me either. But I was just like, well, justice would look like creating a world where I to make a different choice just because I lack resources. Or because someone has decided my child isn't worthy, or like all of those other things that like, and it was just really amazing to me, especially how many white women assumed that I didn't have access to abortion.
I mean, that's white women for you though, ain't it?
It is. And they couldn't really understand like why my choice was more complicated than that, because I think that whiteness is also about like this idea of like, oh, pragmatically, what should you do? I mean, it's like, now that my daughter is 4, I've noticed how many people are just choosing not to have children. I mean, like, I'm sure there are people in this chat that like can't decide, and like, it's like, I can't afford to.
Yeah.
Right?
I got snipped.
I mean, like,
I can't afford to have kids.
Isn't that so fucked though? Like, it's like, you can't afford to have children. And isn't that like, that's still eugenics? Because it's like more broad. It's saying like you don't get to do it. And the government doesn't care about that. You know, I mean, I was talking with a woman in my neighborhood, actually. She was just like, oh, are you going to have another? And I was just like, no. And then she was just like, we want to, but the first thing she said was, I don't know if it would be wise. And it's just like, I mean, God, isn't it sad how much of the human, how much of our existence is dictated to us by these material conditions? Even if you're like God, I would love to have a kid. You're trapped in a system where you can't. And like, I guess it's like, to me, this chapter is really like, I think that it's significant because even though we're not being forcibly, not all of us, because forced sterilization is still happening, we are being coerced by the system to make choices that they tell us are pragmatic and have nothing to do with like community or like legacy. And I don't mean legacy, like I mean like, what is it? I was looking at a thing about like what is it, the hierarchy of needs? What is that called?
Maslow's
Stupid
hierarchy.
Triangle.
Really?
Yeah,
Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Can I just, I'd really like to quickly say, I found out the other day that he actually stole that from Native folks.
That's what I was saying.
Okay.
Yeah. So like stealing that from indigenous people from the Blackfoot, like the highest thing in that is the continuation of a culture, a continuation of like of why we're here. And we have to choose not to have that. And all the other generations put that on us like it's our fault. Like, oh, because you had avocado toast, you can't have children. What the fuck? No. So yeah, I think that was something I just like in particular want to talk about. And then I'm going to link folks to this organization, Sister Song, that does a lot of reproductive justice work. I could get so much more into how like the reproductive justice movement has just been so inspiring. Linked to like disability justice. I mean, like that whole question about who is worth having here, you know, like impacts disabled people.
Yeah.
Deeply.
Absolutely.
And yeah.
So
that's all I can think to say right now.
Fire.
Yeah, I mean, so it's so funny how much of that is like literally, I won't even have to really go too much into my next slide because that's exactly what Angela Davis was saying. So much is like and you know, she's specifically speaking on Black women, but saying that, you know, Black women have not had this same view of abortion in particular, because it's like they don't recognize the economic suffering. They don't even talk about the economic suffering that would lead someone to do something that actually is very difficult, that is emotionally, you know, like not just taxing, but like traumatic, right? And so many of the white women in this moment are talking about freedom and education and like having a chance, blah, blah. And the Black women are saying like, you know, y'all are talking about something that like was traumatizing to us and acting like it was a good thing. So like, we don't fuck with y'all. So yeah, I thought that was fascinating. But like, you know, what you're talking about is still going on today, Doja, because like, you know, everything that you mentioned, isn't that exactly what, you know, like just right in line with that? We do have some good eggs in chat tonight, Kami Abby. We got some bad eggs. We got some good eggs. Oh, and one last thing is that white women talking about careers in education, which in many ways, you know, especially at this time, but in many times, you know, that was out of reach for many working class Black people with or without birth control. So like, if y'all want to talk about, you know, careers like high paying jobs and shit, like people have to be able to get them to care about them, you know? So anyway, yeah, we talked about a lot of this stuff already. But one last thing, and I can't believe I forgot about this. This is another reason, like all the things we talked about, Shantilly, but also this, that eugenics was also a reason for imperialism, to justify imperialism. So whenever the imperial core had so many of its contradictions run their course to where you could, like, the super exploitation of women and Black people had not been enough, where America had to turn outwards. And the indigenous people, of course, but whenever imperialism really started getting going in America is right around the time that eugenics comes up. So why is that? It's so that white people can feel justified in the violence that they do overseas. And as well as in like, and there's always the other side to that. As you do terrible things to other countries, the imperial core has more and more immigrants because of course people would not want to live in the place where you're doing active war zone type violence. They would want to come to live in the place where maybe they could escape that, where all the money is flowing from their country too, right? So immigration is always a part of this, is always a part of imperialism, period, right? And anyway, you mentioned Margaret Sanger. I think that this is really important. Margaret Sanger specifically left socialism to focus on reproductive rights. But when she did, what happened? Bigotry and fascism crept in. So if you don't have that grounding and caring about people, if you don't have the holistic view, if you don't have an intersectional understanding of these problems, fascism will always creep in if you're white, right? So like think about white vegans. Somehow, non-white vegans who are, caring about veganism, somehow non-white vegans manage to not be fascist. Somehow they manage to not be eco-fascist, but white vegans, for some reason, go just bananas and just like will say the most heinous things possible, right? And I've seen it online, and I struggle because I'm a white vegan, right? But I hopefully am not a white vegan. Yeah.
I also thought that was so wild that one time that person was like saying that about vegans. I was like, I think Gomer's vegan. I don't. Anyway.
But I mean,
so you are vegan.
I am vegan. Yeah, I am. And, a lot of my friends are vegan, but so I want to tell you a little brief story, real brief, actually. But I don't do a lot of group chats, but I got invited into a group chat and it was a vegan group chat. It was just starting up. And I was like, look, if any of those motherfucking people come in who are trying to say, and all lives matter and mean animals, okay, or if like the whole non-intersectional vegan bullshit of like anti-indigenousness and like talking about even if you live in a food desert, you better do what you can and basically not giving a shit about anybody. I was like, I don't want them in the chat. They're not allowed. If I'm going to be in this chat, as soon as they come in, I'm out. So anyway, we had that chat for about 3 days before, of course, somebody invited their friend and the friend started talking some nonsense. And I said, hey, this is a specifically intersectional vegan chat. So, you can't talk about, seal clubbing or whatever is your issue du jour, like anti-indigenous veganism is not welcome here. And the whole chat erupts, everybody's fighting and stuff. And I was like, y'all can't help yourselves. I made it clear from the beginning what my stance is, and I'd hope that we could create a space that would actually be intersectional, and y'all just cannot stop being fucking racist for 1 second. Anyway,
debate me. Debate me.
Yeah. They just get so mad. Sorry. Anyway.
I wanted to share one thing about that.
Please go ahead.
One of the things, and then I know we gotta stop hating on. Well, this actually isn't a hate on veganism, because after I had my daughter, I really struggled with breastfeeding. And around that time, I was vegan my entire pregnancy, and I was like, man, we make cows do this, and this sucks. And so I was like in this vegan subreddit. And someone drew a picture, and it was like a cow being taken from its mother. And it was like, if we did this to humans, there would be riots. And I was just like, if we did do this. Like, I was in my feelings because breastfeeding sucks. It is the worst thing that I've ever done. Babies have no teeth, but they have a palate, and it just squishes your boob, and it hurts, and you bleed, and it sucks. I'm saying that. And so I was just irritated, and I got into a drag out fight with this person because all I did was say, but we did do that.
Mm-hmm.
And no one cared. I was just and they were like, but what are you saying? I was just like, I'm just saying that you're making a point, but your point is bad. This has nothing to do with that cows are not human. It has everything to do with that, like, exploitation is a thing that happens when. And so yeah, it was a whole thing. And to this day, I am no longer vegan, but I still use the oat milks. Love a good frothy oat milk from a barista-ing. But yes, white people do be white peopling.
Thank you, Smith. I appreciate that.
No, don't let me have turned you off of having a baby. Having a kid is really great. I would talk a lot about my daughter. She's super fun. But I don't know. I like having someone to share popsicles with and get really excited about, like, watching, I don't know, Teen Titans. It's cool.
I love that.
That's what nieces and nephews for.
See? That's what I think. Like, I used to live in, like, you know, like 2 cooperative houses. And I loved it so much because, like, sometimes I got to be a parent. Sometimes I got to just be like a cool adult. And, like, I hope I get to start a cooperative house again. That was a really fun thing that I did twice.
I just quickly want to say, since we are talking about and slavery in this conversation and in this book, I think it's interesting that you brought that up about cow's milk. Is Black women breastfed white people's babies for like centuries. White women wouldn't breastfeed their own kids. That was seen as a bad thing to do.
Wow.
So Black women breastfed white people's babies.
It's amazing because in that, they said that breastfeeding was gross. That's where that narrative originally comes from, is that, like, white women decided that breastfeeding was gross. So all of this breast is best, like, reclamation of breastfeeding only happened because it was only looked down upon because white people did that shit. And then they came back around. Doulaing is a very similar story. There's so much in birth work and reproductive justice that it's now become colonized, but only after the colonizers decided that Black and brown people couldn't do it, or like it was nasty, or like whatever. They're like, oh, actually, this is very cool, and I am a crunchy granola mama now. It's like, fuck you. Like, ugh.
Oh man.
Don't get me started.
That's awesome.
Let's move on.
You know, y'all are teaching me stuff because I knew that, you know, wet nurses existed, but I did not know that white women just straight up always had refused to breastfeed. That is just wild to me. But yeah, that's terrible. The one final thing on this slide is that big industrialists loved eugenics, especially the ones who were exploiting other countries, the ones who were literally robbing natural resources from other countries were the ones who were setting up eugenics foundations, right? Eugenics schools. And then, you know, you can look it up. Some of the things that Angela Davis talks about in this chapter is it's very interesting in a very like holy fuck kind of way, because like I started just looking up pictures of some of the stuff that, you know, she's talking about, and it's like, yeah, they had schools. They had institutes, you know, and like big, well-funded buildings. Like you could tell money went into this shit, right? So it wasn't just a passing fad. And so often it's kind of like treated as if it's like an idea that gripped the nation for a couple of years. And I just hate this treatment that we get in history books that when we're talking about something real, we cannot be honest for 5 fucking seconds about it. You know, like really. Eugenics was a part of the country, and it was a part of the entire country. White people were just fucking gaga for this shit. You know what I mean? So, yeah, I loved wrong tense. I'm sorry, Clara, you're right. White people still love eugenics, but it's now turned into eco-fascism. And that is the last point I want on this slide, which is, why do y'all think Bill Gates supports eco-fascism? Could it possibly be that Bill Gates wants to exploit the third world like he had to do to get so much of his minerals, to the rare earth minerals, in order to build the computers? Do you think that Bill Gates gives a fuck about the third world after all of the terrible like Bill Gates literally like takes. I'm gonna calm down, but y'all got to understand that Bill Gates has crafted this image of like your friendly uncle who, you know, just loves the world and wants to take care of people and like goes on fucking Ellen and stuff like that to, you know, dance like a weird old white guy and make you think that he's better. But he's literally taken part in, like mining is necessary for building computers, y'all understand. And rare earth mineral mining is one of the most destructive types of mining that there is. And, you know, so Bill Gates is not a good person. And, anyway, the long story short is that a lot of these things that he's doing, like buying up farmland, working on disease controls and preventions, right? This is all part of a plan for, you know, controlling who has the rights to food, who has the rights to medicine, which countries are supplied, which countries serve as test beds for medicine for other countries. You know what I mean? So like, don't ascribe like beautiful philanthropic nature to Bill Gates when he's an evil fucking dude. So anyway.
Yeah, like a dystopian adult novel evil, like Voldemort.
Yeah.
Levels of like, that is not a good person, even a little bit. There's not even an origin story to make it nice.
Exactly.
Is it like in the Hunger Games when Snow back to give him like an explanation story in the prequels that I refused to read?
I didn't know there were prequels. I didn't know they were doing that.
I believe one of them is out right now and he's the central character, and I just don't understand why. I do understand because they're really trying to sell that whole redemption arc. Like, oh, I need you to understand why this person is evil. I don't need to understand why Bill Gates is evil. I get it.
Right.
He's evil. He's making choices. Even in, this whole thing we were talking about earlier with the like vaccines and IP. He's evil. He knows what he's doing means that people will die. He doesn't care about that.
Many people, right? I mean, that's the point. It's like hundreds of thousands of people.
These are brown people, and there's too many of them anyway. Don't you know that the world is overpopulated? Says the man who could like solve. I mean, that's why they're like, oh, why doesn't Bill Gates solve world hunger? He doesn't want to. He thinks all those people should die. If he were allowed to build robots to just massacre people, he would. He's probably working with Boston Dynamics on that right now.
I was just going to say that. I bet that motherfucker is on the board for Boston Dynamics. Somebody look that up real quick. Okay, so we got...
See you in hell, Bill Gates.
Where is Bill Gates? We got two more little slides. We got this obsolescence of housework, and then we got a couple of my takeaways, and I'd love for... Shantilly and Doja to give their takeaways as well. So why is it that housework technology is basically the same since 1950? Now we look at things like, you know, we look at things like robot vacuums that are cool. You know, they're great, but robot vacuums solve one little thing and they don't do well. Believe me, I bought one of those motherfuckers, and it like all it does is chew up cords. So the majority of housework has been basically the same for like since the 50s. Like we have refrigerators, we have dishwashers, we have ovens. Like we still have to do like a fuck ton of, like we have microwaves. We still have to do a fuck ton of cooking. We still have to do like cleaning. We still have to do like things. And Angela Davis is like, hey, did y'all ever think about the fact that a lot of this really could be automated? Like specifically like washing clothes. That's like, there's no reason why this couldn't be industrialized and, you know, roboticized. And I thought about it. I was like, fuck, you're right. You know, just coming from a technology background myself, I was like, this shit would be so easy. Like it doesn't have to be labor intensive whatsoever. And stop abusing the robot. I will not. Smith is always like, be nice to the robot. And I'm like, it doesn't have feelings. I will not be nice. But Smith is always like, you're a white man. Of course you say it doesn't have feelings. So anyway, Seuss, I'm not generally doing this. I'm not doing the dancing thing that I normally do, but since you're being it, I'll be nice. Yeah, and the answer is, of course, that the capitalist economy is structurally opposed to the industrialization of housework. And to admit at this point that housework is real work is to legitimize women, because housework is still to this day seen as women's work. And it is literally, Angela Davis says, it is literally revolutionary to fight these sexist ideas, and it is anti-revolutionary. It is fighting the revolution to maintain these sexist ideas. So there will never be a technological revolution for housework until we have socialism. And I thought that, like, I didn't exactly understand why this capped the book. As far as, like, I didn't understand why this was the last chapter, because I felt like some of the previous chapters were really, like, a lot more punchy, but nonetheless, like, is she, like, this is, I guess, more of a future outlook chapter where she does kind of tie it up. But the idea of, like, you cannot, like, you neither can have socialism divorced from figuring out all of these different intersectional things, as far as, like, if you allow bigotry into your socialism, it will fail. But also, you cannot progress, even in the smallest way, even in something like housework. You cannot progress while sexism still exists, and sexism will always still exist while we have capitalism, because sexism is upheld by capitalism and capitalism is upheld by sexism. So I did think that was very interesting, like, kind of tying it all together, is in, like, look, even down to fucking housework. So I don't know. Did y'all get anything else out of this chapter? Maybe I'm missing something. You know what I mean?
The only thing that I think is just a personal anecdote is, in my political journey, one of the biggest books for me is Sister Outsider by Audre Lorde, and she has a chapter about about housework and ties it into communism. And then that's when I was like, communism sounds dope. I don't have to clean. Like, that was like. And I think that, I don't know, I think that there's more to it than that. That there's also, it's interesting.
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
We all have to clean stuff. And especially someone that was raised to be a woman with the expectation that I would always have to clean other people's stuff. I think it's powerful as fuck. Cleaning sucks.
There you go.
Yeah, I really identified with like the whole thing about, like, the compulsive nature of housework. So I enjoy housework, which is, like, a strange thing to say, I guess. Like, but I feel like in my life there are so many things that, like, are unsure. And, like, when I wash clothes, I know that they will come out clean, and I fold them and I put them away. It's like, it's a task that makes sense. And so I've mentioned before, I've lived in cooperative houses. I'm the person who cleans. And it's hard because, like, I've lived in cooperative houses where someone will have, like, a crime think poster that's like, we all do dishes because, like, don't make women do dishes. And it's really interesting, especially when I lived in a queer cooperative house, to see how that played out, depending on how people were raised in relationship to, like, housework. And there were racial differences as well. Like, I remember having a whole thing with the house was majority white, and I remember that we had, like, your standard white trash can, and the trash can was, like, caked with gunk. And one day I took it outside and I hosed it off, and a person just said to me, like, oh, I've never really thought about cleaning a trash can. I was just like, but it's gross. It has gross stuff in it. Like,
this is,
and they're
like,
like, well, you put the bag in it and it's fine. I'm like, no, but the object itself is disgusting. Does that not bother you? And, like, it doesn't bother people, but it's like, what I like about cooperative living and is that, like, people can bring something else to the table. Like, I got to learn a lot about, like, okay, so, like, maybe this person, like, hoards dishes in their room, but maybe they're really good at, like, making sure that the grocery shopping is done. So there's really something about, like, even, it's like thinking about the distribution of housework and how, like, you can, I don't know, like, appreciate each other in it. It's something that I really liked about living a cooperative house. But I did always notice that, like, non-men did the work. I went from living in a queer cooperative house to living in like, this was like a queer radical cooperative house. So we had like the politics. I went from there to living in a like nonprofit, like established 501c3 house with a bunch of well-meaning, I'm going to be honest, DSA types. And it was always like a very like capable woman and her trash male partner who couldn't do shit. I'm so sorry. And like, why? And just like, didn't understand housework, didn't understand. I mean, like, and we were a child care cooperative as well. Like, couldn't do that either. Like, just trash. And
fucking funny.
I think something that's also really hard though, too, when I think about housework, like this whole, I think that this caps off the thing. I was actually just talking about this essay with some friends because it's like, people are always talking about like wages, you know, the wages for housework, like the Working Families Party or whatever that's called, I think always has as part of its platform. And like, I think where I struggle, and like, I don't think that this is a hot take, this is just rather a thing that I'm still piecing together, is that, you know, it's like I read about like Soviet Russia and like Colin Tai, I read like an essay from her and like, about how like, you know, women to be liberated to like be in the workforce, like we're going to have childcare, we're going to have all these things so that women can be part of the workforce. As someone who likes being in the home, I don't want to be liberated really from like housework that makes sense to me. Like, I just want it to be valued. Like, it's nice when like I clean the bathroom and my husband says to me, wow, you cleaned the bathroom. Thank you so much for doing that. Like, that's a thing that I hate. And so I'm thankful that you do it. Or like, I like seeing people in clean clothes. That was something when I lived in my cooperative house, because I lived with someone who had fibromyalgia. Sometimes they couldn't wash their clothes. They had to go into the basement, come back up. It's bullshit. So I would do it. It's nice. And it's just like, sometimes I feel like housework gets it's like, when we're talking about it, we talk about it as if it's drudgery. And I just like I really disagree because that's not my experience with it. Even though I'm not like, it's like so complicated because I know it's like, I don't want it to be like, feminism is whatever women choose it to be. Like, it's not that. That's trash. It does kind of fit into the vein of like valuing different things that are not like necessarily like productive, like not making an item like type productivity. And so that was the things I read in it.
Right on, Doja. And I mean, I do think that that's what Angela Davis is saying here, right? That like housework is legitimately difficult, and that it is, because it is not quote unquote productive, it is not valued. And because it is tied to women, it is not valued. And so that doesn't change the fact that it is truly labor, but it does affect how capital interacts with it, which is to say that capital puts no resources towards it, 100 years of no resources towards it. Yeah.
And the other thing I was going to say about it is like, you know, I was just kind of thinking about how like, it's amazing that we're having these conversations about housework. And it's because like, it's always existed. Like, so much of how we think about labor is centered on men in the workforce. And it just like leaves out all kinds of things that are labor. And so I'm always thinking about that, because it's just like, the fact that we don't have universal childcare is, but I think it's also connected to why we don't have universal health care. Because we're talking about modes of labor that are care work, that are more about like supporting people. And so I think that like universal health care is connected in that way to childcare. It's connected so much to just like that concept. Care work. Yeah.
Right on.
I have a further point. I need to read more books.
It's what's so wild when I read books. I'm like, fuck, I need to know more about, now I need 12 other books to further explain this one fucking book that I read.
So true. All right, awesome. So I think we're good on this slide. I'm going to share my takeaways. I'd love to hear your takeaways, and then we'll call it a night because I know, I know some of the people in the chat. It's like 1 o'clock in the morning. So y'all learning about women racing class at 1 o'clock in the morning. Oh shit. So racial and gender-based bigotry and violence are promoted by capitalists to economically exploit the marginalized. But also on the other side, when white people try to solve social problems like racism and sexism without intersectionality, fascism will always creep in. Straight up, I think that there is no clearer way to say that, and I think that if y'all don't agree with me saying this as far as fascism goes, you need to go read Blood in My Eye by George Jackson and read his definition of fascism, because that's the only one that's ever made sense to me in my entire life. And I read The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, and that was a long-ass book. All right, so finally, black people have fought at all costs for their freedom and equality, even when violence and suppression was guaranteed to follow. You have a history of black people valiantly fighting for their rights, for their dignity. You have actual heroes, black femme heroes, who did shit that deserves to have stories written about it, songs written about it, and they're relegated to stamps. They're shown as their old lady selves and never shown as the strong younger people that they were. Not that old people can't do it, but they're always shown in this, if they're ever talked about at all, after they're already retired. So all I have to say is that, you should read this book. If you get a chance, it's very clearly written. And also, if you're like me and had a terrible education, because I grew up in the rural South where they told me things like it was about states' rights for the Civil War and the earth is only 6,000 years old, then, we had no benefit of a good education to teach us about the true heroes of the early 1900s, the late 1800s, that there were these time periods that just get skipped right over. And part of the reason is because it was a period defined by, by non-white people fighting desperately for their lives. So those are my takeaways from the book. Shantilly, would you like to tell me some of yours?
That was so much of it. I think the biggest thing is, I love this book because I just always bring it up because, class reductionist, you're like, read this and you'll see how fucking wrong you are about how just solving problems that relate to class on its own will not suddenly get rid of every other problem that exists for everyone. I think the other thing is that oppression can compound, which is so much of what intersectionality and liberatory identity politics is about, is that, we talk about feminism and all the ways that it is hard to be a woman. We talk about racism and all the ways that it is hard to be a Black person. Just imagine what it's like to be a Black woman and to have to deal with both of those things, which is why we need to listen to those that live on these intersections. When you talk about dialectical materialism and looking at the reality and improving the material conditions that you are in, who better to talk to than the people that walk in all of these different parts of life, because a cis Black person will only be able to tell you so much about what they're experiencing. But if you want to know, like, a queer Black person lives at this completely different intersection. Somebody that is disabled lives through this completely different reality. Which is why when we say, like, uplift marginalized voices, this like neoliberal view of it is like this tokenization, but no, like, it is so revolutionary to listen to the people that go through the worst of it, because they are the people that know how to fix it. And that is my takeaway from Woman Race Class.
Thank you, Shantilly. Doja, you got any takeaways from the book?
I mean, like something that just like came up to me, and you know, I think I struggle with takeaways because I think that like obviously everyone gets something different out of it. I think that, you know, if anyone on the chat has not read it yet, like really put it in your list. I know that there's so many things to read, and I don't think that this is a book that you will regret engaging with, because those emotional pieces that come out, it's just like, I think it's really important to develop that capacity if you don't have it.
Mm-hmm.
But something that comes to me, especially when we're talking about class reductionists, is that I think it's like a Stuart Hall quote, the thing about like race is the modality in which class is lived. I think that this book really exemplifies that. Like, though I'm a person that grew up upper middle class, people didn't look at me and know what my father's income bracket was. They looked at me and assumed that I was poor. And that's like a pretty like common experience for Black people. It's that just like being treated as lesser. And so it's just like this idea that bringing about socialism, is going to like erase these things is, I mean, yeah, it's just like, it's ahistorical, right? Like I think that's the part that like we really have to drive home, is that like for all the things that these people talk about with like history, it's just like they're lying. And the other piece is that like you can't bring about a change without us. It's like, how can you say that you're doing something for us without us? That doesn't make sense. So like, we've done it your way. We finished reading a book about the results of doing things your way. I live in a world where things were done, you know, their way. And I don't want to do that anymore. And so I think that that's like one of the biggest things to know about this book, is that it's like all of these people who I don't even think, you know, obviously like class reductionists like don't mean to be, I don't think all of them, I mean, it's an intent impact thing, like, you know, but it's just like, it's like, read a book and let it be this one. For as much as they talk about Angela Davis, it's clear that they haven't read her, and it makes me so angry.
So true.
It's like, read this or Are Prisons Obsolete? Pick one and read it today.
Read both.
Read both. It is a read
no
both.
Bare minimum for these people. Read both and a bunch of stuff.
You're right. Read them all.
And stop
this year.
Probably though. You know? But yeah.
Yeah. Thanks everybody for staying with us.
Yeah, thank you.
I believe we have 80 people on. It's 1 a.m. where I'm at, so I'm just like, wow.
That's what I mean. It's like, yeah, I mean, you stayed on late, and I really appreciate you, Doja Bird. So y'all follow Doja Bird. Y'all follow Shantilly. If you're not an asshole, Shantilly does not like to be followed by assholes. So, shit. Thank you so much, Lost Nowhere. I appreciate that, Grim. Let's do you mind, y'all want to drop your ats for Twitter or anything or have any last words?
Yeah. Thanks for hanging out. Thank you for having me, Gomer and Doja. I appreciate y'all. I learned from you both so much. I'm just happy to be here. And my ad is Shantilly T. I'm around.
Yeah, same. I'm just glad to be on here. I'm still learning so much about streaming, and I'm glad that I got to do this with the two of you. This is really, I just I didn't join Twitter expecting to like meet people that I wanted to build something with. And so like, it's really nice to be doing this, building towards something, you know. I think that that's something that we have really, that's different. Like other streamers are just kind of talking. But like they're just talking out their ass. But like we have a lot of big plans to like move towards something like meaningful. Like never have we been more connected, right? Like exactly. I mean, it's not just the internet. It's across race, class, gender. Like we're in us chat together, and I just like can't get over that. I just think it's just like so powerful.
Hell yeah!
You just have to find a way to direct that power, you know.
And on that note, that's a great note to end on. We are going to raid Dexter Chaco. So yeah, love y'all. I'll talk to you later. Thank you so much.
Everyone.
Solidarity forever indeed. And let's go. Yes, Dexter Chaco indeed, one of my favorite people. And we will do it right now. Y'all have a great night.
Woo! Cool.
All right. Thank y'all.
That felt good. Felt nice.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Y'all killed it. Thank you so much for coming, and I will Venmo you both for your time, because I do not believe in asking non-white people for their time for free.
That is so nice of you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
You should be like, damn right.
Yeah. Send me the money now, Gomer.
No, this was really, I'm so thankful, just like, again, like to have been able